couple of off classes from the usual meta with the rogues and DKs and of course the Windwalk. You know, we've seen some mages, we've seen some elemental shaman, but these are brand new here. So let's see exactly what they can put out as both teams aggressively pull this first set of 9 mobs in front of the dungeon.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what Nalsi can bring here, also known as the Big Papa, on this Shadow Priest here. The first time we see the Shadow Priest, and of course the Hunter too. And you can see on the first pull here, unfortunately the Shadow Priest not doing too much damage, but that's a Shadow Priest being asked to need to ramp up at the very start a little bit. We will see some more damage later on from Shadow Priest. They can do a lot of damage. They're very good on high keys, on live service as well. And Hunter's not too bad either, so there's definitely some interesting things we can see from Big Money Crab here.
Yeah, but part of the concern is, I mean, high keys are one thing. We're here in a race tournament environment. Yeah. We need to kill things as quickly as possible, and we just don't have that opportunity with the players, with the kind of power level the players have at 415 eye level versus a 19. Nonetheless, Black Mamba, understandably, does finish off that pack first. Massive amounts of cleave coming over from their Windwalker and the 2 rogues as they move up to the double Enforcer pack, getting ready to proc their first round of Reaping, which of course they will combine with Harlan Sweete. Big Money Crab here has done the same thing and is only now just stealthed over to their double Enforcer pack.
Yeah, Black Mamba, of course, doing everything just a little bit faster here as they're already working on this Enforcer pack. Now, the one thing to note here about this pack is that the Mastiffs actually have quite a bit less HP than the Enforcers. So if you want to play around it properly, you need to make sure that you do a lot more damage to the Enforcers and not cleave too much, because you don't want to bolster them too early. Now they did kill the Mastiffs off, but the Enforcers were already pretty low, so the bolstering was not too bad.
Important to note as well, for those of anyone who's curious, the Hunter's actually running Lightforge Draenei as the race right now, not Night Elf, likely because he could just feign death a lot of the trash skips that they're going to do, so he kind of has his own version of that advantage, so taking advantage of some of that damage nuke that the class does bring, the race does bring, rather, not the class. But Black Mamba has indeed started it here, combined their first Reaping Wave along with Sky Captain Craig, the first boss of the dungeon. We're in that tyrannical environment, so a lot of one-shot potential, especially as the boss transitioned to phase 2 at 75%. A lot of damage coming in on the group as well during this first phase, just hitting the group randomly with that shot.
Yeah, so we also see Black Mamba, of course, popping their Bloodlust, saved it for this very moment for the boss, because, as he said, it is tyrannical, so the bosses do have a lot of HP. So Bloodlust very efficient to use on bosses, especially if you put it on top of Reaping as well, as both Black Mamba and Big Money Crab are doing. Now, in phase 2, you can see it start now on Black Mamba's side. We see the Razdunk just kind of standing outside and baiting those green pools on the ground. You also can outrange the shot, the big damage shot that melees can't really avoid, but as a range you can outrange it, so that's why he's standing so far away.
Yeah, I mean, you know, nice amount of damage coming in from the Shadow Priest as well right now. Certainly the Hunter booming in damage. We're going to see that Shadow Priest start to take off a bit more in the second phase, but, you know, the issue, Nigura, I'm sure you can comment on this too, in this volcanic environment, it's very irritating for casters especially, because you constantly have to interrupt your cast, especially depending on the density of trash that you pull, because you're just getting plumes spawned under you at all times. Nonetheless, the Shadow Priest here on Big Money Crab does move outside of the arena, as we typically see range do. They're actually having the Hunter be the one to bait the kind of parrot poop along the outside away from the melee, whilst the healer, Froggy, and of course Niles, aka the Big Papa, are safely on the outside DPSing, not having to worry pretty much about any mechanics.
Yeah, as a Hunter, of course, you don't really lose any DPS whatsoever from moving if you're playing BM, so very nice adaptation here to have the Hunter bait the pools, and the healer just he can stand still and cast Solar Wraths, increasing their overall damage basically, so he doesn't have to move all the time. We probably might also see later on the boss where you have to kite the sharks, that the Hunter might do it instead of the healer, because then the healer can actually go in cat form and DPS the boss.
But Black Mamba certainly has found themselves well ahead here. Almost 20% difference between the two teams as they hit 25% on the board. Both teams sitting at 22% apiece for the trash, of course. Exact same pull pattern coming out of them to try and spawn that first Reaping Wave. Big Money Crab now hitting 36% on Sky Captain Craig as they sit there and just turret on the outside. Yeah, it's tough to say right now. I mean, they're not really closing the gap too much. They're going to get access to their second round of cooldowns now, and it looks like they're starting to close the gap just a bit, 14-15%, but a lot of damage coming in here for Black Mamba as some of that frontal cleave the team, and you end up with Cheat Death being procced on one of the 2 rogues for the side of Black Mamba.
Yeah, he needs to heal them up fast, because if the next shot is coming in and they're not full HP, they might just die, especially without Cheat Death available, as he does struggle to heal the whole group up, even himself. Himself is not too dangerous, like he doesn't have to heal himself up all the way to 100%, because the only thing he can get damaged by is the green pools on impact, and they really don't do that much damage, so you don't have to have full HP. Now Black Mamba did finish up the boss without any deaths, and now they're stealthing past fastest enforcer.
Yeah, so they have the self-passing enforcer. Of course, because of the double row comp, they do have access to that double shroud, so double on that 6-minute CD as Big Money Crab was 16% behind on the boss when Black Mamba finished theirs and are only now able to finish off Sky Captain Craig. They're going to be ready, getting ready to do their respective skip of the officer. Now, it looks like we've had an oarsman pull here on the side of Black Mamba to the left of the bridge as they come through. Not a typical pull that you see from teams, but I actually remember maybe a week or two ago, Nigura, we were commenting that there was a team that did this, and I guess it was them. Oarsman, a really annoying lieutenant-style mob, a lot of health, especially in this bolstering environment, and has a kick has a cast that you need to interrupt that just spawns a bunch of swirlies under you that hit you up in the air. So really not a typical pack that you see. There's some easier trash in here that the players can access.
Yeah, this is the pull we've seen from west and east when there's bolstering in Freehold. Probably because the pathing just works out better this way if they pull this pack, and maybe the mobs have more equal HP compared to other pack. I'm not sure, but bolstering typical pull here by Black Mamba. We'll see but Big Money Crab not choosing to pull these mobs, just going straight down to the pirate area, to the next boss area, and dealing with the trash here. Now, bolstering is something you really have to watch out for, just because not only is it very dangerous if the mobs are bolstered because the tank could die or anyone else could die, but also because it's very inefficient to bolster mobs because they gain more HP, not just damage. So you have to do more damage to them to kill them.
Love seeing this from Black Mamba right now as the entire team pounds Bruise relentlessly in order to get the captain event spawned, and then the rest of Druid immediately goes over to the Ring of Booty in order to start the event for Lightning the Pig to spawn, whilst the rest of the group trust themselves to stay alive without the healer. Wong as well, just bolstering up there right now, making sure, or bunkering up to make sure that none of the bombs get too bolstered and that he survives by the time the Druid gets back, which he does right now. So the team is nice and healthy, but Wong dipping just a bit low there, a bit too close for comfort right now as he starts to backpedal away from the mobs. Bit of support coming in the form of a leg sweep there to make sure that the tank doesn't dip just too low. Big Money Crab now at 30% on the board, doing a bit more of a modest pull. It's starting to remind me of what happened yesterday.
Yeah, so Big Money Crab, one thing to note about their comp, of course, they do have different utility this time around compared to the usual comp that we see. They do have the Hunter utility, which is very nice with the misdirect coming in. You can pull packs later on top of the group because the tank doesn't have to go there and pull them because the hunter can just misdirect and pull them on top. Now, on a bolstering fix, you don't really want to pull mobs on top if the current mob that you're pulling is already low HP. So not very beneficial for them here. And Shadow Priest does not really provide that many very useful utilities except the Master Spell, which can help for weaving.
And that awful goblin form that we see on the top of the screen there. But, you know, I mean, I hear what you're saying about the hunter. I don't really agree, though, because, I mean, you still have tricks of the trade from what would be the second row.
He has to go there, right?
Yeah.
The hunter has range, so it's slightly better.
Slightly better, but doesn't have mass stealth, so.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, Big Money Crab here, 38% right now, looking to clean up and spawn their second reaping, something that Black Mamba on the left side of the screen has already done. They've aggroed the Council of Captains at about average of 60% health between the two that they need to DPS, which is, of course, Captain Jolly and Captain Raoul. Captain Eudora, not active this week, so she's actually helping the team, and they're doing well to move around, of course, the brews that we mentioned week in and week out, wanting to make sure that the players and not the bosses absorb the two buff brews consisting of haste or crit, and that they move the bosses into the bad brews, which gives them a very heavy nature damage over time effect. So really key to making sure that this fight ends quickly.
Yeah, Black Mamba, of course, dealing with the boss while Big Money Crab just now proc their 40% weaving wave. So definitely behind on Big Money Crab's side. They're just doing everything a little bit slower, just doing more modest pulls. Also, like, even if they do the same pulls like we've seen at the very start, they just do everything a little bit slower. So meaning they just bolster mobs more than the other team, and maybe they just have less damage or less efficient damage. But Big Money Crab on 48% trash now, so they caught up on trash. It seems like they're not actually dealing with the pirates right now. They're just stealthing to the Ring of Booty.
Yeah, they perhaps will do Trothite first. That's just kind of how the dungeon is after you deal with Sky Captain Craig. You really have the entire dungeon exposed. You can actually even do Harlan Sweete second if you want and come back to the other bosses, but they do aggro a couple of the Ettins, perhaps 3 of the Ettins coming in. Not a pull that we typically see coming in from teams. I guess certainly an easier way to perhaps deal with bolstering and a bit of an advantage for the caster, but also a disadvantage for the caster. You constantly have to move for these boulders coming in. It's an immense amount of damage for the tank, and the melee constantly have to run away from the AoE swirly that is put down by the Ettins. So a lot of damage and just a lot of kind of area denial for these players. So hopefully it's something that is well practiced for them and worth it. Certainly they provide a nice chunk of trash percentage, but Black Mamba has now killed the Council of Captains and are hot on the heels of Big Money Crab, moving over to the Ring of Booty area themselves.
Yeah, I like this pull by Big Money Crab because they do have the 2 range compared to all other comps were say full melee comps. The two range don't have to dodge this AoE around the Crashers, as you can see going off right now. So these kind of pulls don't really work out with a full melee comp because they just impossible to DPS them basically because they constantly cast those AoEs. Now, one thing that probably was a mistake by Big Money Crab was pulling this Brute. As you can see, it rooted in the back, but they did a very good job at just knocking it away, vortexing it away, and then just rooting it in the back. So they didn't bolster their Crushers.
57% for Big Money Crab right now with Trash after getting those 3 Crushers down. Black Mamba at 58. They're easily going to proc their 3rd Reaping Wave here with the 8 mob pull that they just did, and will probably drag that on top of Ludwig von Tortollan in just a moment because you certainly don't want to combine regular Trash with him in this bolstering environment. He has a high amount of HP, and the amount of babysitting you need to do for his health versus cleaving everything else down very slowly to make sure he doesn't over bolster is just not worth their time. So Big Money Crab pulling some extra Trash on the side as well, looking to do the same thing and proc their 3rd Reaping, as Ludwig is indeed pulled here for Black Mambo, sits at 69% on the board for Trash and is cleaving down the Reaping.
Yeah, let's see how Black Mamba is doing here, because they played this dungeon already yesterday against Accompany and they lost. They had 6 staffs. They played a little bit sloppy yesterday, but this time around they seem pretty clean so far on Black Mamba's side. They have 0 deaths still. They're dealing with the down with the Reaping Wave already. All they have to do is kill Ludwig, and we all know Ludwig is not a very dangerous map as long as you don't get hit by those shells that are going around. Now the problem is that since it is such an easy mini boss, you kind of want to pull something on top of it, but in a bolstering environment you can't really do this. So this is why they're just having to deal with Ludwig by its own.
You know, I've never noticed he has a little kind of potion on his backpack. I wonder what he does with that. Anyways, you know, I noticed earlier that the Hunter actually got very low as you were talking about Ludwig. 1% health on Nekak, so managed to kind of avoid that. Now Hunters unfortunately do not come equipped with a cheat death like Rogues do, so same with Shadow Priest. So if they plop, and that would be a death on the board. But the two teams having a very clean time right now. 67% on the board for Money Crab, but 69 still for Black Mamba. Ludwig has finally fallen though, which is a very important check mark for the dungeon, as it's 50% now for Big Money Crab. But I mean, you know, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here. It looks like they're neck and neck right now. Everything's great. 0 deaths on the board, but Black Mamba's killed an entire boss ahead of Big Money Crab at this point. I mean, they completely eliminated Council of Captains. Big Money Crab hasn't even gotten to that, let alone pulled Trothak, and Black Mamba's actually ahead of them in order to try to pull Trothak. It's not looking very good for them, Nagura.
Yeah, definitely Black Mamba way ahead at this point. They also kill Ludwig faster and are 10% ahead in Trash and the whole boss ahead. So it's definitely Black Mamba that is in the lead here as they're pulling Trothak. One thing to note about Trothak is, of course, with a full melee comp like on Black Mamba's side, the Arrested Druid is going to be the one who kites the sharks in the outer corner. You can also see those gray pulls on the floor where the sharks are going to be kited through, because they do get stunned if you kite them through it. And otherwise, the melee is just standing there DPSing the boss. The only thing they have to do is make sure they go away from this AoE, the Bladestorm that he's doing right now, the Shark Tornado. But usually when you have Outlaw Rogues, they can still attack the boss as long as they stay on max melee range.
Bit of a scary pull coming in here for Big Money Crab as they actually dedicate their Bloodlust to it. Huge damage coming in on Tagorian as they get a Crusher plus a lot of the patrol surrounding. Now the Crusher has a huge amount of health compared to the rest of them. Froggy getting a huge chunk of damage. Malarkey proccing the cheat death as well as they struggle to keep Tagorian alive. Niles was earlier harpooned into the group but managed to disperse. Of course, that is their damage reduction cooldown and move out of the group with that. So just trying to stabilize, but here comes the bolstering in just a moment. It's going to be really daunting for the Warrior, who already has shield walled pop. So that is going to be going down in just a second. They're going to need to start kiting defensively, but there are harpooners present in this group. They will grip the furthest target from them, so they have to play well around that, and somebody needs to be in front of the tank should he need to kite. Netcax getting a bit too close though and getting stomped. The first death actually of the entire match of both teams, finally going down on the Hunter, unfortunately of all people, as the battle res comes up and they try to finish off this pack.
Yeah, so they killed a lot of mobs already, and this Crusher still has a lot of HP. This Crusher is bolstered so much right now. You can see how big he is and how much HP he has. All those small mobs died a little bit too fast. The Crusher, of course, had much more HP than anything else. And then you had those harpooners on top, and this just seems like a very dangerous, too dangerous, really. I feel like that's something you really don't want to do. As the tank goes down, the rogue goes down, everyone goes down. They probably have to reset completely or Shadow Meld off the aggro because this Crusher has a lot of HP now.
It's good to Shadow Meld the aggro here. They haven't killed the Council of Captains yet, so their checkpoint is actually back at Sky Captain Craig at the beginning of the dungeon. So good heads-up play by Froggy, but frankly, getting themselves in this situation in the first place was just an awful idea. Pulling, I think, 10 mobs, something like that, plus the Crusher was an extremely higher amount of health and is already very dangerous, as we toted earlier when they did the triple Crusher pull. Not a good idea. Obviously didn't work out for them. 5 deaths on the board as they wait for the rest of the team to get over, and they still have some aggro from their 4th Reaping Wave. Black Mamba, Sunshine and Daisies here, 19%, 17% now on Trothak as he takes a huge hit, and the Resto Druid kites the Sawtooth Shark well around the arena, keeping the team nice and healthy as they're about to down their 3rd boss.
Yeah, Black Mamba probably after this boss are going to go straight to the last boss room. At least that's what we see on the non-bolstering affix combination. Now with bolstering, it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to pull Moss on top of the last boss, of course, because we don't want to bolster the boss, obviously. So what we probably see is them dealing with some trash first, then do the boss, maybe pull some of the trash in at the very end of the boss when he's very low HP, making sure they kill the trash and the boss at the same time, still making use of the bombardment. But Big Money Crab is having so much trouble here with this trash, just continue to die over and over.
Yeah, Tagoran just running in, face pulling everything, obviously needs to, just because of the mass aggro range of these Reaping mobs. The problem is Froggy's behind, doesn't get the Dispel off, doesn't get any healing on him during the hit, so he goes down immediately. Obviously their aggro turns over to the Rogue, who has the 2nd highest threat. They smack him in the face. They have to use the remaining Battle Rest to get the tank back up, who doesn't have access to the Bwansamdi's Bargain cheap death trinket, and now they're just slowly 4-manning the rest of this because the Rogue would have to release all the way back at Sky Captain Craig. Now, he could get back because obviously he has the capability to stealth, but I guess the team's deciding it's just not worth it, as we see that Psychic Scream of fear from the Shadow Priest with another mobs way far in the distance right now. Hopefully they have a good bolster plan for that. Black Mamba has already moved over to the final area of the dungeon where Harlan Sweete resides.
As a Black Mamba, that was very beautifully done by Black Mamba as they pulled a 2 Ravager pack. They made sure one of the rogues was off-tanking 3 mobs with 1 Ravager, and the tank, the Prot Warrior, was tanking the other 3 mobs with a Ravager, and then the Painful Motivation got off and made sure that all of the mobs died at the very same time. Of course, you don't want to have 2 of the buffs go on the same mob, because then you have 1 very highly bolstered mob. So very well done by Black Mamba to handle the situation. And now they pulled the last boss and used their 2nd set of Bloodlust here on Harlan Sweete.
Harlan Sweete here, 80%. We do know, of course, it's everybody's favorite 3-phase boss, where at 60% we'll enter the 2nd phase. Everybody except the tank in the group will get affected by the Cannon Barrage, and of course the Slicing Winds will shoot out in the 360-degree rotation. Only difference at 30% for the final phase is that 100% increased damage taken and 100% attack speed on the tank, but he already melees for peanuts right now, so it doesn't really affect him, even in this tyrannical environment. Certainly not one of the more dangerous bosses for tank damage income. Trothak finally pulled here on the side of Big Money Crab, 89% trash on the board. Just starting fresh. They still haven't killed the Council of Captains, so after Trothak, they'll need to go all the way back to that. I mean, Black Mamba just miles ahead at this point.
Yeah, Big Money Crab kind of... The interesting thing to note about their comp is that they can't change 2 classes for the next game. They can only change 1 character, so they can either change the Shadow Priest or they can change the Hunter, or they can change the Rogue for something else. But it's going to be Tol Dagor. It's going to be Tol Dagor next, and we've seen some very interesting comps, and we noted before that for Tol Dagor, it's really not that important what kind of comp you have, because all the trash basically dies to the cannon, so you don't necessarily have to run the Stellar Rogue Windwalker comp. You definitely do want to have at least 1 Rogue because of the cannon area, because of the Shroud and opening the cages, but other than that, it really doesn't matter as much as in other dungeons.
There is a bit of strategy importance relying on double true CC after you kill the first boss. So there's 2 sets of 2 mobs leading into the cage area with all the buffs that is just very useful to have, either double sap or a cage from a Demon Hunter to make sure that you can go by them and not waste time, but certainly nothing too significant, as Nigger is mentioning here. 40% on Harlan Sweete right now as Black Mamba looks to shoot through the rest of the boss's health. Not even 50% yet on Big Money Crab. And Blue actually going down here for Black Mamba. Fortunately, they have have 2 battle reses available and immediately use that, one of them up, to get the Windwalker up and healthy so that he can continue to chew through Harlan Sweete.
It's so unfortunate. They had such a clean run with 0 deaths, and the Windwalker just going down in this very last moment here. Now, Harlan Sweete is reaching 30% soon, taking 100% increased damage on Harlan Sweete. So what we're most likely going to see, either they finish off the boss first and then deal with the trash, or they want to play it a little bit riskier, pull some of the trash on top once the boss is low, making sure they make use of the cannonballs and doing damage to the mobs. But then again, they have different kinds of HP, and bolstering is going to be very dangerous. So maybe they just want to play it safe and kill off the boss first.
And by now, they know how ahead they are. I
Yeah.
mean, I could honestly raise a child, have it go to college, come back, and then retire, and Big Money Crab will still not be done this dungeon by then. So they're substantially behind. And I guess, you know, part of the reason, this is why, you know, everybody kind of memes the meta, and it gets kind of dull to see the same classes, but this is why. They just have so much strength, not only numerically, but in kind of qualitative utility that they bring. Unfortunately, another death by Blue here at the last second on Black Mamba, as we do have some bolstered enforcers running around with the Mastiffs. A lot of damage coming in on Wong, but a bit of a sloppy finish here, but they will be able to close it off. Wong rocking his trinket just for show, of course, at the very end. 99% on the board for them, and they will be looking to close this out.
I'm not sure how highly bolstered the Stormcrawler is. It doesn't look like bolstered at all, so they can just finish this off. But there's also other trash they could pull, other Ravager packs to get this very last percent. But yeah, a little bit sloppy here in the end, but they managed to, they are very far ahead and much cleaner run by Black Mamba compared to Big Money Crab.
2 on Tol Dagor.
So right out the get-go, Big Money Crab, actually both teams, of course, expectedly using that Shadow Mass stealth and going straight to the Sand Queen. But a bit of trash being pulled here on the side of Black Mamba as well.
Yeah, we've seen this before. They pop their Bloodlust here as they pull some of those crabs and a crocodile on top of the Sand Queen here. Now, usually when you pop Bloodlust at the very start, or if you only pull the boss without any trash and you want to save your Bloodlust for the first upheaval, so you get the full uptime on the boss for the single target damage. But this time around, we actually have a fortified setting in Tol Dagor. So the more the Bloodlust on the trash actually helps you a lot too, because the trash of course has more HP, and the Sand Queen on a non-tyrannical setting is really not a big deal.
Not too big of a deal. I mean, the upheaval can still chunk you pretty hard, but the crabs do go down before they're able to do too much damage on the players, especially in this enraging environment. As Nagur mentioned, keep in mind that means anytime a trash mob hits 30% or lower, it will deal 100% increased damage. So it can get pretty out of hand, especially if one of the crabs grabs you with its pincer and just kind of keeps you there in any of the sand traps, etc. So well done by Black Mamba to get that extra 5% on the board. Big Money Crab is actually ahead of them right now. So 54% for the Sand Queen for them. A lot of good damage coming out on their part. You can see just how much damage increase is coming out of the Windwalker. Plus, pretty essential and affects the BM Hunter as well, is that 5% physical debuff that he's putting on the mobs in Nagura.
Yeah, I think it's actually a good choice to have the Windwalker here instead of a second Rogue, I believe, for Big Money Crab, because the Hunter does have a lot of the same abilities as a Rogue has too. They do have the Misdirect, which will help them in the cannon part later on, and they of course have a Feign Death, which is similar as Vanish. And then the Ring of Peace is just so important on a raging environment, because you just pop it when they're low, so the tank doesn't have to deal with them, and it interrupts the cast as well if the tank is just far enough away. So I think it's a good choice to bring the Windwalker here instead of a second Rogue.
I agree, and really nice movement coming out of Big Money Crab right now. They're doing a bit more of a detail-oriented pull, where they haven't actually pulled the same crab pack that Black Mamba has, meaning that if they veer too far from this round kind of ring of markers that they've put down, they can actually proxy aggro it or proximity aggro it by accident. So they're doing very well to move around the markers that they've put down. You need a 3-marker rotation. They've put 4 down just in case, as Miles getting hit by their last upheaval. Sand Queen hitting 12% for them. Black Mamba pulling just a bit ahead right now. They probably have access to their second round of cooldowns and are about to down the Sand Queen first.
Yeah, Big Money Crab, of course, have 0% trash still. They didn't deal with anything here. They just went straight to the boss. Now, the trash percentage in this dungeon is really not a super big deal, because we talked about this over and over. The most trash percentage you will get with the cannons later. In theory, you only need to kill 16% trash, and you can do all the rest of it with the cannon part. But we've seen some teams have different strategies. Some play even 2 Reaping Waves before they go to the cannon part. Some pull some trash on top of Jess Howlis, which doesn't work out all the time, but we'll see what kind of strategies those 2 teams are choosing to do.
So we already see the power of the double true CC, true meaning, of course, you can kind of term we've coined here over the course of the spring season, where you can just run through the trash that is CC'd and not aggro it. But a lot of trouble coming in here for Big Money Crab, as actually they on purpose, I'm pretty sure, died here. So their alternative to the double CC is actually to just have 3 of them die that don't have access to the Shroud, run through, and then res them upstairs. But unfortunately, Froggy gets caught. They don't have a good enough stealth and sap combo. They're just not well enough coordinated as he does go down. So he's going to need to release and go all the way from the Sand Queen all the way back upstairs to the players that are remaining dead on purpose, so that he can res them a couple floors up. So this is, I guess, this is just the crux, the problem with not having access to either Demon Hunter or the second Rogue to make sure that you get that CC. So Tank has to res one more time, pull everything to the side so that the Druid can get through. Another death has occurred on purpose, unfortunately, and the Druid once again for the second time is going upstairs. Finally, the sap target is appropriately assigned here from Malarkey, and they're going upstairs. Blind sap combo as the Druid goes up now, but that's just so much time lost, Nigura.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think it was because they didn't have a second rogue. They just, like, that was just bad play by them, because they have a rogue who can pull the Thug to the side. It does have stealth detection, so you can't go past it with the stealth, but you can have the rogue pull it to the side, then vanish. You can have the hunter go to the side and feign death and then get rest or something like that. You have so many things to do, or the tank pull it to the side, everyone go past and then rest the tank. And they just kind of messed it up. They had everyone in combat die, and then even the healer get in combat and die. So this is why it cost them so much time here. While Black Mamba already procced their 20% Reaping Wave, and they're already in this Jess Howlis area. So definitely Black Mamba way far ahead at this point.
Yeah, but the problem is they had to die anyway on the side of Big Money Crab, because even if they did the pull like you're saying, with the Thug and then they went upstairs, they couldn't double CC the 2 pairs.
Yeah, but you don't
packs.
need to, because you can just have the hunter go in combat and then feign death. The combat, right?
Yeah, true, he could have, but, well, not at the wall, but at that point, you're right, they did blind and sap. So certainly something they could have done just a bit better on the side of Big Money Crab, as Malarkey getting just a bit of damage incoming from the Striker, and will actually finish him off. I believe he was caught, unfortunately, trying to unlock the cages down there. Finally, though, Froggy is upstairs, and hopefully will have res range on all of his dead teammates, getting them ready for Jess Howlis floor. Something that Black Mamba has already chewed halfway through, dealt with the first Reaping Wave, as Nigura mentioned, and is getting ready to pull on the other side of the room. Yeah. Or is getting ready to enter the second phase.
Black Mamba actually doing this one thing we've talked about earlier, where you pull the boss through the cage here on the other side. So this is something that multiple teams have tried to do, and they ended up failing because things went wrong. They pulled trash that they didn't want to pull, or they didn't deal with the trash properly. So we'll see how it goes for Black Mamba here, as some of the trash already went through the cage. You can see some of the raiders here on top, and one of the arsonists will get pulled as well. So we'll see how they deal with this trash, on top of having Bobby to interrupt, and also Jess Howlis to deal with, of course.
Yeah, it seems like the rest of the trash actually didn't come along, so everything looking pretty good for them right now. They only have 2 of the raiders from the cages, which are already dead. They got the successful first interrupt. Howling Fear comes in, immediate interrupt goes off on that. Bobby is actually on top of Wong right now, finally gets interrupted, and the flashing daggers are coming out, so they need to move over to the side and line of sight that before it hits. So everything looking pretty dandy for them, just making sure to stay on top of explosives. Thank you. So they hit it on the side there. Hank goes and smacks it. He does need a dispel, of course, on the poison coming out from Jess Howlis, which the rest of Druid does well to do. Big Money Crab still working on the same floor, now at 6%, as they start shooting through the trash in a more traditional means. It seems at least they're starting to go around the floor. They're not doing any of the pull through the cage stuff that Black Mamba did.
Yeah, Black Mamba is doing really well with the strategy here. So what they basically can do by pulling the boss through the wall here is that they don't have to deal with just one pack where the Warden is in. Now, where the Warden pack is actually a little bit of a problem on Fortified and Raging, because the Warden needs to be dispelled twice to get rid of the Raging effect. So he needs to be soothed twice by the rest of the Druid. So it does a lot of damage, and it's just very difficult to deal with on a Fortified setting. So it's well done by them to just avoid this pack completely, pulling the boss through the wall, basically. And now they just need to do a Shadow Meld skip to the cannon area, and then they can deal with the rest of the trash.
Yeah, so the remaining 79% worth of trash that they have will all pretty much be dealt with cannon. Here comes the Shadow Meld upstairs from them as they move into the hall. One of the rogues run off screen as they get ready to crowd control anything they need to. They pick the lock on the cage, and they will do another mass stealth right past the spotter there, making sure that they get to the cannon and start chewing away at as much percent as possible. Now, in explosive, we have seen this be a bit sloppy yesterday in Tol Dagor. I mean, the cannons certainly do the work for you, but Explosive still spawns, Raging still spawns. Somebody has to control the ads well coming in, and you have to proc Reaping at the right time. So hopefully they have that all well planned out as Big Bunny Crab is about to proc their first Reaping here.
Yeah, so one thing to note with Explosive here is that the less people that are in combat with mobs, the less explosive you actually get that are spawning. So if the cannon, if the rogue in the cannon actually shoots the mobs and no one else is attacking them or gets in combat with the mobs, then they will actually get less explosive. And that's going to be very important, because if you have the whole team being combat and you get more explosive, it's just going to be so hard for them to deal with it, because it's a full melee group, and the rest of it can't really kill them either with solar wraps or sunfires or moonfires. It just, they have too much HP, especially on plus 19 with these affixes. So definitely want to make sure that they're not getting in combat with them if they don't have to.
Ursul's Vortex already coming down to the hallway here for Black Mamba, as Wong pulled pretty much the entire floor and line of sighted around the corner. They're trying to make sure that the mobs stay in there as long as possible. So Ursul's Vortex went down well, after which the Ring of Peace came in to keep them centered there in the middle. They don't want these mobs running all over the place, because explosives that just went off right now are going to start to plague the team. There's a couple more in the distance as the Rogues make sure to, I think, pre-pop Cloak of Shadows before getting back into the cannon, as those explosives will damage you. You're not immune to damage in the cannon. You're not magically safe, so you do have to take care of yourself. Reaping Wave procced here. The actually double Reaping Wave, if I'm not mistaken, 40 and 60% is present here right now as they just cannon the entire thing down. Unfortunately, they decided that Wong needed to go with that Reaping Wave as well, so Wong eats the brunt of one of the cannonballs to the face, but they do have the battle res active, so they're able to get him up right away and finish up the Reaping Wave, which they now sit at 79% on the cusp of the final one, the second last one.
Yeah, that was actually very well done by Black Mamba. They got 60% trash almost within a couple of seconds, really. That was well done, even though Wong died at the very end, but it didn't cost them too much. They just popped the battle rest, which is something you can maybe question, because the Reaping Wave was almost that. They could have just waited and had a normal rest, but maybe they're confident that they don't need any more battle rests, as they have their one up already now, so maybe they just don't need to. So you see the double rogues here, one in the right cannon, one in the left cannon, just dealing with the last few trash packs here and the 80% Reaping Wave, and then they're done and they can go to the next boss.
Deja vu here for Big Money Crab, as they're once again stuck downstairs in the sewers with the rest of Druid needing skip help from the Prot Warrior. They did wipe upstairs. They're now at 14 deaths on the board, so it now needs the rogue support, of course, to get past the sapped mobs from earlier, and needs to get all the way back to Jess Howlis' floor, and then need to have a go at it again. So not having a very good time there on Big Money Crab's side. Black Mamba now has pulled Valyri, Knight Captain Valyri, the third boss of the dungeon, and it's going to be all eyes on those barrels, as we already see the rest of Druid grab one off to the side. The teams need to do well to pre-position the boss in the corner so that they have access to that damage.
I just want to shout out Froggy Rester here, the Druid on Big Money Crab, because he farmed a beautiful transmog on the tournament realm. Maybe should have used that time to practice a little bit more, but let's talk about that later. As Black Mamba is already on Captain Valyri here, 70%. Now, the Rest Druid actually died. This means they have to finish the boss without a healer, which in theory is possible, or they have to have a full team wipe and keep going again, because they can't rest the Rest Druid.
The only problem on this boss in terms of damage output is the damage over time fire component, the ignite that she puts on a player. It could be any player, not just the tank. In terms of actual raw melee damage, yeah, the ignition here. In terms of the raw melee damage that she puts out, it's actually not a big deal. You can just live with Vivifies. We're not in a grievous environment, so they should be able actually to kill her off as long as they get a bit lucky with who gets affected by her damage over time. Especially if it goes on the Prot where you can actually spell reflected back. So a bit of good luck and good faith there. That happens for Black Mamba. Big Money Crab still working their way upstairs. Unfortunately, they're kind of just working as a two-man team right now, trying to finish off the rest of the first Reaping Wave that was upstairs, but there's a bit of trash involved with that, as they do have explosives in the pack. Froggy dies again and Malarkey follows suit. They're just not able to get upstairs and stabilize. Things are looking very grim for them.
Yeah, so Black Mamba still 36% on the boss left without the healer. Now you can see, of course, Blue is trying to off-heal as much as possible to make sure the tank stays alive. Other than the tank damage, there's not that much they have to handle with, except this debuff, as you mentioned before. But Wong is dropping pretty low. There's a lot of time where he gets a breather when she casts a Cinder Flame here, for example, where she doesn't melee the boss during this time. But still, you can see Wong struggling to stay alive here.
I mean, he should just bandage forehead, and then everything would be fine for him. Knight Captain Valyri at 13%. I really did not honestly too much concern that they would kill this boss. This boss really has just such low damage output. It's a highly mechanical boss, and if you do it correctly, you're good to go. So 6% on Knight Captain Valyri. Now, if this happens on Korg coming up, that's going to be quite detrimental and easily a wipe. So, but we're in a fortified environment, so hopefully they have a good break. And I think it was them yesterday that had really good luck with the doubles for explosives, so we'll have to see what happens as they go upstairs now. 91% on the board. They have killed most of their trash, and they're getting ready to either do some combination of skipping the trash, killing Korg, returning to the trash to proc their last reaping, or procking their last reaping and just shadow melding it off before they get onto that last boss. Big Money Crab, 19 deaths on the board, finally gets back upstairs and is dealing with that first reaping wave.
Yeah, so Black Mamba is actually selfing past the trash here. They can really do whatever they want at this point because they're so far ahead, of course, compared to Big Money Crab, who haven't really dealt with Jess Howlis yet. So Black Mamba is on the way to Korg, as this boss we've talked about a lot and how difficult it is. But on a fortified setting, it really shouldn't be a problem unless you get really unlucky and just keep getting doubles. Now, if you keep getting doubles, even on a fortified setting, this boss can be a problem, but then you have to be very unlucky. So it should be alright for those for Black Mamba to deal with this boss, especially since they saved their Bloodlust just for this moment.
I mean, most of the bad luck really seems to have gone over to the side of Big Money Crab. They're just having a tough time right here. Haven't even engaged on Jess Howlis with 19 deaths on the board. So hopefully they don't hit that big 2-0 as Black Mamba has now aggroed Overseer Korg as the final boss of the dungeon. We'll have to keep an eye on, well, not only the cross ignition that could hit players for quite a bit of damage, but really the important is the doubles that Nagura keeps mentioning. It depends on the cast pattern of when Deadeye is cast that they get. That is just a huge amount of healing and stress on the healer, and it's just so easy to fall behind.
Yeah, most definitely. If he casts a Deadeye cast, which is kind of this reset of his ability rotation, and he gets an explosive burst right afterwards, then we see Big Money Crab actually engaging Jess Howlis, have 20 deaths. So we have a 2-0 for the death counter here on Jess Howlis, and they also have their Reaping Wave proc. But let's go back to Black Mamba. I really like seeing them doing so well today because they did struggle a little bit yesterday, and this is a really clean run by them in this Tol Dagor. They also seem to be having a very good time compared to their time trial. And this is what we want to see from Black Mamba because they're the ones who can still get a land spot. They can go into those top 4 spots and get a land spot, so that's definitely something we want to see from them. This improvement from yesterday to today.
Yeah, and 2-0, not only the amount of deaths on Big Money Crab's side, but the score that Black Mamba is looking to close off this series with as they get Overseer Korg down to 40% right now. Having a fair bit of good luck with these doubles right now, but a bit of stress coming in on the Resto Druid as he dips below. Now, we do have one of the rogues not having access to the cheat death just because they actually procced and died on the trash on the way up to Korg, so bit of vulnerability there. But in a fortified setting, I mean, a lot of the danger just comes through attrition as well. The longer, obviously, the boss is alive, the more chances of doubles coming in. Mana starts to become a problem for the rest of Druid. But in this fortified environment, it is a bit more forgiving to the players. We're now sub 20% on Overseer Korg. They will have to kind of U-turn and back it on up, back to the cannon here on this floor to finish up their trash, whilst Big Money Crab is at 30% on Jess Howlis right now.
Yeah, Black Mamba, if you look at the damage meter for a second here in Black Mamba's side, the rest of Druid is actually managing to do almost 10k single target DPS on this boss, on top of just healing the explosive burst. So very well done by the rest of Druid here, just min-maxing the HPS and also doing so much damage on top of this. Now down the boss, the only thing left for them to do is kill some of this trash with the cannons, and then they're done. They don't have to deal with the last Reaping Wave, of course. 3 deaths, and their time is a little bit slower actually than their time trial time, but still just very well done by them. They do have the 3 deaths, which is something they have to clean up when they play against Accompany, for example, or buff warrior nerf rogue later on, but still, I just really like Black Mamba improving from today to yesterday.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, I know what you said. You were very confused with what you just said as well. Jack making fake clapping noises at Nagura right now, but I totally agree with you. I mean, Black Mamba is something we've mentioned a lot on the table as a team that constantly struggles. Sometimes they're just so hot and cold, and it's
actually be kind of obnoxious after the first boss point operated crowd pummeler with how those packs end up working out. But overall, I actually don't think it will end up being too bad. We actually do see both teams here mirroring the similar opening strategy here, using their Shroud to make it towards this Pavilion area, where they're going to activate some of their Peacekeepers, letting the mech jockey run into them so they're able to get a decent amount of count just through those Peacekeepers. And they're doing all a pretty big pull here. You do actually see the Bloodlust come out for Accompany just a couple seconds before buff warrior nerf rogue here, but a big pulls for both sides.
Yeah, so the one thing you gotta watch out a little bit for is those small, laborers who have very little amount of HP and they die really quickly, and then bursting can be a big problem for those kind of teams. Now, we do have a little bit of a problem with the graphic here. It's supposed to be tyrannical, bursting, and quaking, so the the affixes that are shown are wrong.
Yeah, you actually did see Leaxa end up popping his Tranquility really early there. His team ended up being really well. It ended up being really okay for them just because he ended up tranking early on that 5-stack of bursting that they did end up getting. We saw Buff War Nerf Rogue drop incredibly low whenever those laborers did end up going down. Buff War Nerf Rogue is trying to kite out some of those Peacekeepers, get those energy shields, while Accompany still has just a couple more mobs they have to end up dealing with. You actually do see that mech jockey right there finally going down, and now they have 2 half-health Peacekeepers.
You definitely got to watch out here, not only for the bursting, of course, where the players need to play around it. You don't want to refresh it at the very last second, and you also don't want to have too many high stacks of bursting. But other than that, quaking can be annoying. It can be overlapping with certain other mechanics that are not avoidable, something like a thug charge plus a quaking at the same time, or similar mechanics, especially if you have a full melee lineup and you're forced to interrupt your target. So let's say I'm a rogue, I need to interrupt my assassin because he's casting his Venom Blades, and then you get the quaking at the same time, and everyone needs to kind of interrupt their target. So it can be a problem, but those kind of players, they should have a plan for quaking, and they should know exactly where they need to go without damaging anyone else in their team.
Yeah, you actually did see Buff War Nerf Rogue getting their reaping, the first reaping of the instance, just a little bit before Accompany. Their opening pull might have just been a little bit larger, and they actually ended up cleaning up, even though their pull was a little bit bigger, they ended up cleaning it up quicker, and then they ended up kind of backtracking a little bit, grabbing the assassin and the thug near those rowdy revelers where they're all partying back there. As Accompany has also procced their first reaping of the instance, looking to pull it into a couple trash mobs here, while Buff War Nerf Rogue ends up dealing with their 2 thugs that they still have alive.
Yeah, so MOTHERLOAD, one of these dungeons where we see a lot of trash being played before any bosses are getting pulled, just because this dungeon is so much trash. I think it's almost more than 200% that you even need. So there's just so many different kinds of trash that you can pull, but a lot of the trash is either very, very difficult or very inefficient to pull. So most of the teams are choosing to do almost all of their trash percentage that they need before the very first boss in this kind of area where you see those Peacekeepers. And this is why, the reason why that is because those Peacekeepers just give so much percentage. Not only you get the percentage from the Peacekeeper, but also from the jockey that activated them and jumped inside.
Yeah, you actually do see on the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue, people are starting to drop incredibly low here. Lazorus, the Windwalker Monk, ends up getting stunned. He actually just got low from some incidental damage, but he's going to be topped up here. On the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue, you actually saw them do something that was kind of cool. They ended up sapping that mech jockey, and they ended up using the Ring of Peace in order to be able to knock the mech jockey towards that unpiloted Peacekeeper robot. And then they tagged it out of the sap, and then the jockey ended up piloting that closer robot. So that would otherwise be a jockey that you could not get into that Peacekeeper mech. So you're able to get more count out of that than you traditionally would be able to. And that's the reason that we've seen DKs used a lot in MOTHERLOAD, just because of the ease of use of being able to grip those mech jockeys close to those Peacekeeper robots. But of course, we're not seeing any DKs here today, most likely due to bursting and how bursting ends up working with how blood DK damage. But overall, we're seeing a pretty good strategy out of Buff War Nerf Rogue here, while Accompany is just a little bit behind them.
Yeah, one thing to note is that Buff War Nerf Rogue actually was playing DK in their time trial run, so they're choosing not to play the DK anymore in this dungeon here. Maybe it's something because of the changes, because in a tournament setting you can only change one class for each dungeon, so maybe that's the reason why they don't want to have their DK here. But Buff War Nerf Rogue is proccing their 40% Reaping Wave here and pulling it on top of something else, while Accompany is not proccing their Reaping Wave yet. Now, I did mention that Accompany actually had a faster time in the MOTHERLOAD time trials compared to Buff War Nerf Rogue, but this time around Buff War Nerf Rogue is faster. Yeah,
they're definitely ahead, and it could be due to like the pull after coin-operated crowd pummeler without the Earth Shapers and everything can actually be a really dangerous pull. So if you actually do end up messing that up, you could actually see some teams really struggling here. As you actually do see Ching on the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue going incredibly low here as he's face tanking the Reaping and all the Peacekeepers and everything. You actually do see the Windwalker Monk ending up going down. They're going to elect to use the Battle Res here. One of their rogues also got hit by the Shadow Smash, so he has reduced health as well. And Buff War Nerf Rogue is able to recover there, but that was actually very scary from them.
Yeah, those big pulls, they seem easy-ish, but they are very difficult because there's so much control that you need to do. There's so many targets that need to be interrupted, so many targets that need to be dealt with, especially if you have a bunch of casters and thugs and random charges going around. So definitely gotta watch out here. And if you have one person die, then that could cause a wipe very quickly, because their target that they're interrupting or they're supposed to interrupt can't be interrupted anymore because they have a dead player. So you definitely want to watch out for those kind of pulls that both those teams are doing, as Accompany is actually using a Shroud and going towards the first boss. Now they're doing a bigger pull here as they pull the Peacekeeper, and they also aggroed the left pack as far as I'm aware, so you definitely want to watch out that there's interrupts coming out.
Yeah, it looked like I think they might have sapped or blinded one of the mobs there off to the side as well in order to be able to not get... It might have been a refreshment vendor because the refreshment vendors do require a lot of kicks. So maybe they're killing off a couple of the mobs from that initial pack, getting that Peacekeeper piloted, then they'll end up pulling the rest of the mobs into that pack as well. As the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue, they're doing a very similar pull to what we see on Accompany. And Accompany is actually at about the same point in terms of trash count. You did see Accompany end up going around the right side of that pavilion while Buff War Nerf Rogue ended up going around the left. So Buff War Nerf Rogue does have access to some more Peacekeepers that they're actually able to get pretty easily, whereas Accompany has a little bit more challenging Peacekeepers to pilot here. As Buff War Nerf Rogue actually drops incredibly low, you did see the Windwalker Monk hit about 7% HP there, but they're going to be able to recover there as Loda does heal everybody up.
And that was actually very bad bursting management by Buff War Nerf Rogue. As their healer, Loda, was completely out of mana. They killed one mob, and then at the very last second of bursting, they killed a second one, and then at the very last second of bursting, they killed a third one. So they refreshed it at the very last second multiple times, while Loda was just struggling to keep everyone alive because he was completely But now he managed to get a Shadow Melt off and managed to get back his mana so they can continue playing.
That's actually super smart, especially in a dungeon like MOTHERLOAD where you actually want to be chain pulling a lot of these high health Peacekeepers, maybe whenever they're at like 30 to 50-ish%. You want to be looking to chain them over and over again into more packs. So them stopping and getting that Shadow Meld and then him drinking to full just so they can continue to chain pull over and over again is very smart from Loda there. Accompany here just dealing with a couple more mobs, and we're going to be seeing where they end up going. They're probably going to end up pulling a couple more Peacekeepers with their third Reaping of the Instance here, whereas on the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue, they have also recently procced their third Reaping of the Instance and doing it into 2 packs here.
Yeah, so both of those teams pretty much procced the Reaping, the 60% Reaping at the very same time. So both of those teams neck on neck here as they are fighting with the 60% Reaping wave on top of some other trash here. Now, the boss probably will be pulled later on once their Bloodlust is ready again, because it is a tyrannical setting and you want to kill the bosses as fast as possible. So that's what we've seen from teams in the past. They either save their Bloodlust for the boss or they save it for the trash right after the boss, because that one can be very, very difficult, especially if you have things like bursting, doing additional damage, and quaking.
Yeah, so there's like a big strategy with how you end up doing that pack after coin-operated crowd pummeler, whether or not you pull 3, 4, or 5 packs of trash. I think with bursting, I think it's kind of highly unlikely that we do end up seeing some of those larger 4 or 5 pack strategies, especially since neither team is running an Unholy Death Knight. So I think opportunely we're going to see Bloodlust probably popped on coin-operated crowd pummeler, but we could see some different strategies here coming in for the teams. As you do see Accompany here getting a double mech jockey, a double Peacekeeper pull here with both of the mech jockeys piloting those, whereas on the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue, they have finally gotten to 70% as they do finally finish off that pack.
And we see Buff War Nerf Rogue getting to 70%. Accompany not that far behind either, though. They just need to finish off the Peacekeepers, and then they're going to be over 70%. So both teams very close to one another. As Buff War Nerf Rogue does a pretty huge pull on their side, as they succeed one of the thugs here to not have multiple of them up at the same time. They already have 3 thugs. So if they have 4, that's just so much random damage from those charges, and so many interrupts on top of that too. Loda can soothe off the enrich effect from the thugs if it's not interrupted, but if you have 4 of them at the very same time and you get those random charges out, that definitely sounds very scary.
Yeah, so something that they actually did is they ended up not knocking one of those mech jockeys in near those Peacekeeper, that unpiloted Peacekeeper robot, and both of the mech jockeys ended up running towards the same one. So they ended up kind of wasting one of those mech jockeys' potential count that they could have gotten. It might just be something to do with how they end up getting count over the rest of the dungeon, but overall we've actually seen a lot of the strategies revolving around doing the most Peacekeepers possible. I know that we've seen some strategies where you end up pulling like 7 Peacekeepers at once and stuff like that, but obviously Buff War Nerf Rogue here pocketing their 4th Reaping of the Instance here, running towards coin-operated crowd pummeler, and they're going to be pulling that in just a couple seconds.
Yeah, they did use their Banish here and the Shadow Melt to get rid of not only some of the Reaping mobs, but also the Succeed mobs in the back, because of course if you pull a pack and you have some of the mobs Succeed, like the Thug that we've seen before, then you need to drop combat with it, because else after the sap is over, it's going to run to you. Now we see them actually dropping very low here with the Reaping Wave on top of the very first pulse that leaves a dot behind on the whole group, but Loda managing to keep to heal everyone back up here and throwing those bombs on top of the boss so you have the damage increased on him.
Yeah, that pulse of course is that static pulse that you're actually seeing on the screen right here. The last Reaping mob is end up dying, and it ends up putting those ground effect on the ground, forcing everybody to kind of move out while they do get hit by the static pulse. This is also kind of dangerous with quaking. So if quaking does end up lining up with that static pulse, we could actually see people dip incredibly low, especially if Lexi doesn't end up having everybody topped up or hotted up, or if he's just like looking to kick some of the foot bombs into the boss. The foot bombs, of course, do give the boss an increased damage taken buff whenever they are kicked into him. So you're trying to game them, of course, kick 2 in at once, and then right before that 3rd foot bomb does end up blowing up, you do end up kicking it in as well. Accompany here using their Bloodlust, while Buff War Nerf Rogue has elected to not, though.
Yeah, so we'll see if Valyri and Azerogg will still use the Bloodlust later on. Maybe wait for their cooldowns to be back up, because usually both of the teams didn't have their Bloodlust ready when they pulled the boss. It was only a couple of seconds on cooldown, but that is very annoying because you usually want to use your cooldowns when you pull the boss, basically. So if you don't have the Bloodlust available and you use it 30 seconds after, then none of your damage dealers has your cooldowns ready, and you don't really want a Bloodlust without any other offensive cooldowns on top of it. So maybe that is why Valyri and Azerogg is saving it a little bit more, or they do what we said earlier, that they save it for the trash packs right after.
Yeah, this quaking is actually super scary on this tyrannical fight. We've actually seen both teams dropping incredibly low whenever that static pulse does end up coming out. As you do see the quaking coming out for Valyri and Azerogg, getting that rogue incredibly low. Marito doesn't have cheat death for a couple more seconds, so he ended up hitting 10%, so that could have been scary if they ended up having to use a battle res there, but he does end up getting topped up, and he'll have his cheat death available in just a couple more seconds.
Yeah, so Accompany is pretty far behind on the boss, even though they did use their Bloodlust, and Valyri and Azerogg did not. Of course, they pulled the boss a lot earlier compared to Accompany, but they're Rogue actually going down here, and this is the second battle rest that they need to use here. Now they're out of battle rests, and they can probably finish off Crab Pummeler here, but those stats, those 10 seconds, especially in such a close game, can matter in the end.
Yeah, Axel on the side of Accompany, he looked like he ended up proccing cheat death, and then he ended up taking another instance of damage right after, ended up dying straight through it. So that was actually very bad for Accompany, forced to use one of their battle res as well, and it's just quaking on this fight with that static pulse just puts everybody in such a weird spot, because most of the time you'd want your Wrestler Druid to be kicking the foot bombs, because they're the only person who is at range. They of course lose the least amount of damage by standing at range the whole entire time, and they're a healer of course. You actually do see Valyri and Azerogg here doing a 3-pack pull, so it's actually not that bad. Okay, wait, is that
those are 4.
It's 3, because they ended up leaving that one that's in that corner over there.
Yeah, still 4 because they pulled the patrol on top, but they did use their Bloodlust here. Now, bursting might be a problem if they don't manage it properly, but those mobs just do so much damage in general. That's why you see Ching drop so low. One of the casts actually went through that wasn't interrupted by one of the damage, and you see the Windwalker drop very low as well with the bursting stacks, but they managed to reset the bursting, so they should be fine here, as Ching is just kiting away, because at this point it's so hard for them to tank those mobs for a long period of time, as you do just so much tank damage and other random damage on the rest of the team as well. As you can see them just being kind of split up here as the Bloodlust is about to run out, but Ching just making sure he stays alive here, just using the CC from the Windwalker and the Rogues, making sure that everything is fine. And the Sappers, oh, he just interrupted the explosion here at the very end.
Yeah, so that final blast will end up killing the Sappers. So sometimes you want to interrupt it, especially if it's going to end up rolling bursting over, so you can interrupt it with Typhoon or Ring of Peace. Accompany is actually going down here, as you do see Lexi in the tank for Accompany end up going down. They end up releasing right back at coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, so they're trying to get back to the mobs that are just standing there, as they do only have 2 mobs left, but it's just, that was just like mismanagement of bursting and how many healer cooldowns they did have available. So that's how bursting can actually be super scary in this instance. And Valyri and Azerogg using their Bloodlust there, making sure that everybody was able to get topped off, making sure that they didn't roll any bursting stacks in order to be able to refresh that at an opportune time. And they're just pretty far ahead of Accompany here, as they have pulled AsaRock.
Yeah, unfortunately, one of their rogues, Tom, got a triple fixate by those Earth Ragers, so that is something he definitely needs to watch out for. If he gets hit by all of them at the very same time, they put a bleed dot that stacks on the player. If you get hit by them, that does a lot of damage, especially in a tyrannical environment. So you want to make sure that you kite them well, as you see them just kite in a circle around, which is what you want to do, especially in a full melee setup, because if you kite them in a close circle, they will just stand on top of the boss, meaning that the rest of the melee can attack the boss but still cleave down the Earth Ragers and get very efficient single target damage still, while also AoEing at the very same time.
Yeah, so you actually see a lot of usage of like Ring of Peace or like Ursul's Vortex in order to be able to keep them grouped up on top of AsaRock, and then of course whenever they do end up doing their AoE pulse, you'll end up having like a leg sweep or like a shockwave from a warrior in order to be able to stun them out of that AoE that they do end up doing, that resonant quake. Like you said, you did see on the side of Accompany, they did end up using the shockwave there. They have additionally pulled AsaRock, but you actually do see a little bit of a percentage difference between the two teams. You see Accompany here at 87%, where Valyri and Azerogg is actually at 92. I think that Valyri and Azerogg might end up pulling this Taskmaster pack that sits right next to AsaRock, as you do see it actually coming in here on the side, where Accompany might end up having to get some of the trash from the R&D wing in order to be able to get full count.
Yeah, 13% is quite a lot that they're missing here on Accompany's side. The Taskmaster pack probably will not be enough for Valyri and Azerogg either, but there's still other trash, those the Ragers, the Elementals that they can pull on top, because there's no affixes preventing them from doing so. There's no bolstering anything like that, or Sanguine, so that they can definitely pull trash on top. They definitely need to watch out for the Taskmaster though, because he casts this cover the whole time, and the cover ability just kind of makes the mobs around him redirect all the damage they take to the Taskmaster, while he also has reduced damage taken. So you want to make sure that the mobs are not too close to the mini-boss when he casts cover.
Yeah, of course, AsaRock, once you do end up actually killing those ads, he doesn't actually do too many abilities. He just kind of does that tectonic smash like you see on the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue, which is a frontal cleave that'll end up stunning any player that's inside of it. It does a pretty sizable damage. It won't end up one-shotting you on this level, but you could end up, if you did end up getting comboed with some of the trash abilities or something else, it could be very scary. Of course, he does summon an Earth Rager kind of infrequently, but overall, this fight actually doesn't do too much. You actually do see Loda on the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue pulling some of these Stone Furies, like you were saying as well, trying to get a couple more hits of percent here right before they do end up proccing their final reaping of the instance, and they're probably going to end up running it into Rixxa Fluxflame's room as those mobs do go down. We're Accompany here. They're kiting around the Taskmaster, a very similar pull to Buff War Nerf Rogue, but they're also going to need to be getting a lot more percent here.
Yeah, so the Restorator on Accompany side actually got hit by the frontal of the boss and almost went down. So it was lucky that he survived there as he got hit by the smash. But as they said, after this mini-boss, they still need quite a lot of percentage. So they either have to pull something in R&D wing, or the Restorator has to go back and pull a lot more trash on top of this boss, which you're probably not going to see because you don't want to pull any of those very dangerous trash in the back on top. So we're probably going to see an R&D pull, which we've seen teams do not so good at in the past, because there's just so many dangerous mobs in the R&D wing. You have those masterminds and other casters that if you don't handle them properly, if you don't interrupt all those dangerous casts, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, you actually did see Buff War Nerf Rogue getting one of those little shield biters before they are hitting these minecarts here. They're going to be probably looking to kill one of the small HP rats and then proccing their final reaping of the instance, then running into Rixxa's room, popping their group Shadow Meld in order to be able to Shadow Meld off most of the reaping there, and then pull their one reaping mob that they're going to get into Rixxa. Accompany here is also down AsaRock as they are hitting these minecarts as well, and we're going to see them pulling this R&D trash like you were talking about. So the issue with a lot of this R&D trash is it's actually very hard to pull pretty big in this space, especially since you do have these masterminds kind of patrolling around. So there's only so big that you can end up pulling here, and that's why we actually see a lot of groups electing to not pull a bunch of the trash here because it's just not efficient count-wise.
I just really love the strategy of Buff War Nerf Rogue coming in here as they had a Ring of Peace dividing the rats to make sure that they only pull one test subject and don't pull the rest of it. Now, unfortunately, their warrior went down as they were doing the skip, so they have to use one of those masters to get him back up. But it's not going to be too much time lost as Accompany, of course, is still working on that trash, still working on this mastermind, and you can see just how much they're struggling, especially with tank damage here and bursting on top of that.
Yep, and they do end up downing that mastermind. They still need 2% more count before they do end up proccing their last reaping of the instance. They're probably going to be looking to get it here. I hope these rats end up giving them 100% so they can actually make their way into Rixxa's room, because Buff War Nerf Rogue has already pulled Rixxa Fluxflame down to 90% here.
Yeah, so Buff War Nerf Rogue definitely in the front seat here as they're already fighting the boss, while Accompany just now got their 100% trash and they're reaping. Now they have to do the skip without having anyone die because they're already on 4 deaths, 1 death more than Buff War Nerf Rogue, and they don't want to fall even more behind when it comes to this time difference from the deaths, because they need to catch up a lot at this point. They need to do a lot more single target damage, or they need to hope for Buff War Nerf Rogue to make some sort of mistake, as they don't have a battle rest available on their side. So there's definitely something that can go wrong on their side.
Yeah, they actually ended up pulling that mastermind on accident. Maybe somebody was just a little bit too close, or maybe it just got proxy pulled by some of the other trash. But it looks like they're going to have a couple deaths here on the side of Accompany. It looks like the mastermind's going to end up killing Lexi and the protection warrior, but that Windwalker Monk is actually going to be able to res Lexi. Hope he doesn't get kicked by Quaking here, but this is actually just so bad for them as it's going to cost them a lot of time. And they're kind of hoping for Buff War Nerf Rogue to make a big mistake here on Rixxa. Rixxa, of course, actually does a pretty sizable amount of damage on Tyrannical just because of the chemical burn. So basically the chemical burn will go on the 2 closest targets, and it can get dispelled off, but of course healers only end up having 1 dispel, so you're going to end up using cloaks, or end up using spell reflex, or end up using diffuse magic in order to be able to put that debuff back on the boss or get immune in general. But if it does sit on the tank or somebody else for too long, then it's actually going to be scary, especially in this Tyrannical setting. But I think on the side of Buff War Nerf Rogue, it should be okay as long as they don't end up making a huge mistake, as Accompany has just pulled Rixxa.
Yeah, so on this boss and on the last boss, Quaking can actually be a problem because this debuff that you were talking about gets applied to the 2 closest targets to the boss. Now, if you get Quaking at the same time while the debuff is coming out, then people, they might be spreading out for the Quaking, and then maybe if the debuff go on a person you don't want it to be on, and then you end up not having defensive strategy, or a Dispel ready, and that can definitely be a problem. But they, okay, that one
Just like
actually going down. Yeah, so they did have the Quaking, and he didn't have anything ready as he goes down. They do have the Battle Rest just getting back up, though, so they did manage to rest it. But now they're definitely going to be out of Battle Rests for a very, very long time, so they can't make any more mistakes at this point.
Yeah, you cursed Buff Nerfrook there. As the Windwalker Monk did have that chemical burn, ends up getting hit with Quaking and just ends up going down. They're going to be downing Rixxa Fluxflame in just a couple more seconds here. Hopefully they don't end up having more deaths. Of course, they could probably even do the rest of this boss without a tank even, but it would actually be just a time waste here. They're going to get another checkpoint here as soon as Rixxa does end up going down, whereas Accompany here is at 50% on Rixxa Fluxflame.
Yeah, so Loda has to debuff on him. He doesn't have a Dispel ready, but he should be able to survive. And even if he doesn't survive, the respawn point is right on this boss as soon as you get the boss down, so it wouldn't be a problem either. It wouldn't cost him too much time. As we see the Shroud come out, now you can actually skip all the way to the next boss if you have a Distract on this very last pack here, which we've seen before. But some people choose to just run through and pull it and then just Shadow Melt, because we are all Alliance, right? So we can just use that ability to be faster. And we see Ching actually just doing exactly that, just picking up this War Machine, making sure he is the one who has aggro, leaping to the stairs and using the Shadow Melt.
Wait, did the Windwalker Monk end up falling? Okay, so the Windwalker Monk ended up falling off the bridge, but he's actually going to be okay. I was worried that he might end up accidentally pulling that Mastermind there. Of course, you also do need a little bit good of patrol on the Masterminds, because they do end up having True Sight and can see you out of that Shroud. But Buff War Nerf Rogue ends up doing their skip, not having any deaths, not having a Mass Res. Mass Res is actually kind of punishing more so on this Quaking affix, just because your healer can end up actually getting interrupted here if they are kind of unlucky with when that Quaking does end up coming out. Accompany, though, is going to be downing Rixxa Fluxflame in just a couple more seconds, while Buff War Nerf Rogue has already pulled Mogul Razdunk.
Yeah, so in the last boss, Quaking can also be an issue, because you have this Gatling gun where that goes in a circle and everyone needs to dodge it, but while also being very close to the boss, kind of stacking up. So if you get the Quaking while also having the Gatling gun, it might be difficult for them to stack up and still, or spread out rather, sorry, for the Quaking, and then still also not get hit by the Gatling gun. So that might be one issue. And then of course in the intermission phase there's a lot of AoE damage in a tyrannical setting, while you also have the ads, and then Quaking on top of that just might be a problem. And as I said, they don't have a Battle Rest available to them, so they definitely got to watch out to not make any sort of mistakes here, as Accompany is already on their way to the last boss as well.
Yep, so they made it, they look like they ended up getting their skip off really well. They get their Shadow Melds out, making sure that nobody ends up dying. They're not wasting too much time there. We did see Buff War Nerf Rogue kind of making a couple mistakes with how they ended up doing their skip, wasting a little bit more time than we did see from Accompany here. So Accompany is really trying to put themselves into position to capitalize on a Buff War Nerf Rogue mistake. And even though Accompany did end up having a little bit better of a time here in the time trials, we actually have seen Buff War Nerf Rogue just playing this dungeon a little bit more clean. The pull after coin-operated crowd pummeler is just a little bit bigger and a little bit more clean from them, and that's put them in a position to take advantage here, and they are just a little bit ahead here, as Mogul Razdunk has phased at 50%.
Yeah, it looks like maybe in all those 5 tries that I had in MOTHERLOAD for the time trials, they just didn't really get the perfect try in, as their time trial time was actually 30 minutes. And at this point, they're 24 minutes into the dungeon, and it looks like they're definitely going to finish the dungeon faster than 30 minutes. So they're going to beat their own time trial time as long as there's no more mistakes coming in from them, as they are in an intermission phase. And this intermission phase, there's a lot of AoE damage, and one of them actually going down, the Windwalker going down. This means they don't have a battle rest available. This might cost them a lot, because not only is it going to be difficult to finish off the boss with only 4 people, but it's just going to take them so much time to finish it off without one extra DPS player, as Accompany is on 60%, and this might be their chance to catch up.
Yeah, this is definitely Accompany's chance to catch up, because they don't end up having the battle rest. Even though they do have Bloodlust available on the side of Accompany, they also have Bloodlust available for them. It's also important to note that we do have a 1 death difference in the favor of Buff War, as they do have 5 deaths on the board, whereas Accompany has 6. So that's also something that could actually be in their favor as well. Ching ends up popping his Bon Zombie's Bargain as he gets incredibly low. He's going to end up being able to come back for that, as Loda does end up healing him up. But this is actually so bad for Buff War Nerf Rogue.
They have to be careful here. Ching so almost scary. Going down. Thankfully, he did have the trinket ready for him, this cheat death trinket. If not, he would have just went down there, and they would have had a full team wipe come in. As Loda is also dropping very low from having the missile on top of him and just having the Quaking, just so much damage coming out. And as we said, just having one less damage dealer is just gonna make this phase last so much longer. Accompany, on the other hand, are in the intermission phase. They do have their Bloodlust available, so once they're done with intermission, they can try to nuke the boss, but they're still just so far behind. So Buff War Nerf Rogue, I feel like they have to make one more mistake for Accompany to catch up here.
Yeah, I think you're right here. I think they're just too far behind in terms of just like what how much damage they're going to end up having for Mogul Razdunk. Of course, buff or nerf rogue here with 2 DPS available to them is going to take a ton of time to get this bottom 20% of Mogul Razdunk, especially with Accompany having Bloodlust here. But at the same time, I think it might just be too far gone, like you were saying.
But the HP is really not going down for buff or nerf rogue. It seems like they've been on 20% for the last 5 minutes, it feels like. Well, Accompany's already nuking the boss here with the Bloodlust available, so maybe there's a chance for Accompany to actually catch up on the damage. As you can see, the rest are just being in cat form, trying to push the damage as much as possible. Buff or nerf rogue on 13%. They just need to make sure to survive and to kill the boss faster than Accompany, because they are catching up pretty fast and they're doing so much damage as well.
Yeah, Leaxa here doing a lot more damage than we actually do see from Loda from buff or nerf rogue. It's also very important to point out, especially since we do have this depth differential of 1 in the favor of buff or nerf rogue, so they're going to have 5 seconds available to them that Accompany has to kill Mogul Razdunk in front of them by. But it looks like that Mogul Razdunk is going to go down for buff or nerf rogue here in just a couple seconds. That was actually almost a major blunder from them.
That was so close, to be honest. Buff or nerf rogue definitely needs to improve their gameplay if they want to be this 3rd spot in the region.
Yeah, a little sloppy play there.
Percentage, of course, even though there are more of them up, so sometimes we just see riskier pulls, especially at this very start, as you see from both of the teams coming in.
Yeah, you actually do see both of the teams. They're looking like they're clearing the whole entire room, doing both of the tick packs, and then all the trash that is available to them in the room. Those ticks actually do explode whenever they do end up getting killed, and Leaxa ends up going down on the side of Accompany. That was actually so bad for them. Fortunately enough, he does end up respawning right there at the beginning of the instance, as you did see the matron like run out of the room. You actually see that maggot there ending up casting his frontal ability, just continuously casting it even through the knockback there, because he did have that Warcry buff on him. So that's just something that you actually need to be focusing on. Accompany, they're going to be able to recover there, but that was almost a major blunder from them.
Yeah, this is something we've seen from a lot of other teams before, even from teams like Method EU, that their healer just goes down on this very first pull, because there's so much pressure on the healer. There's nets that go out randomly, there's spears that go out, and then on top of that, the healer is the one who will get charged by the matron every single time. And this matron charge does do quite a bit of damage, especially if there's buffs going out or anything else. And then you have Grievous too, so if you get a little bit unlucky and you get hit by multiple things at the very same time, you can very easily go down as a healer. Now, luckily, you do have to spawn the entrance of the dungeon very close, so you can get back very quickly, and you don't have to use anything you don't have to use Battle Res or anything like that in case someone dies. Of course, if the healer dies, you don't have anything anyway, but if someone else does, you can just release immediately and it's not a big deal. Now, both of those teams choosing to not use their Bloodlust, so they're most likely saving it for the very first boss with the Reaping as well.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of difference in strategy between these two teams as well. Accompany there electing to blind the Priestess from that patrol that's on that bridge there, and then jump into that mass pack, while buff or nerf rogue ends up pulling that Priestess with the Headhunter and the Blood Matron pack solo, ends up single target nuking down that Priestess, and then ending up pulling the rest of the mobs into the mass pack. So it's just going to be a little bit difference in percent here, as both teams do end up proccing their first Reaping of the instance, jumping straight into Elder Leaxa. Ching making sure that he is in there first on Elder Leaxa in order to be able to get threat, so he's actually able to spell reflect the first Blood Bolt here, whereas Accompany has already popped their Bloodlust a little bit earlier. They're on Elder Leaxa just a little bit quicker, just because of how they ended up dealing with that Priestess there.
Yeah, this is definitely a very difficult pull for both those teams, because Leaxa, not a boss that it doesn't seem like it does a lot of damage on the group, but that's because if you don't interrupt anything, if you don't interrupt every single cast, the tank might as well just get one shot. And we see Ching actually dropping very low as one of the casts actually just goes through, or he got hit by some other ability. He did have the tank trinket, the cheat death trinket available to him, so he didn't go down, but that was very close for buff or nerf rogue. They definitely gotta watch out that they have all those interrupts go through, but as soon as the Reaping is down, they should not have a problem anymore.
Yeah, it looks like their Windwalker Monk has a 2-stack of that debuff from the ground effect, so it's going to make his damage reduction, it'll make his damage decrease by 20% because he has 2 of those stacks. So that's actually really bad for buff or nerf rogue. That's going to end up forcing them to take a lot more time on Elder Leaxa. They might end up spawning an extra Blood Effigy because of that too. So that's very bad for them. Whereas Accompany here has Elder Leaxa down to 25%. They spawn their second Blood Effigy of the instance. A lot of the time we're going to end up seeing like a prop warrior end up using his Spell Reflect, as you did actually see there, in order to be able to kill that Blood Effigy from about 50-ish%, because Spell Reflect on those Blood Bolts, pretty good ability, honestly. It does a lot of damage to pretty much everything here, Elder Leaxa and those Blood Effigies.
And we've seen some teams, if you want to play a little bit riskier, you can actually save your Spell Reflect for a boss instead of the At. Now, of course, that means that At is going to be alive for longer, but the more boss damage, the faster it dies, and the faster you are in the dungeon, of course. So sometimes we'll see teams just constantly interrupt the effigy and just slowly cleave it down instead of using the Spell Reflect from the tank. But Accompany just playing it a little bit more safer here, and they also just killed the boss first. Of course, their Monk getting hit by the damage increase didn't really help at all for buff or nerf rogue, but both of them using their Shrouds here to get past some of the trash, and now they're in Krogmar room. Now we definitely gotta watch out for this trash as it is very dangerous.
Yeah, so something to point out is Accompany versus Buff War's percent. Buff War is at 23%, where Accompany's at 21. I know yesterday, whenever we did see Accompany play, they had a little bit interesting strategy, and Leaxa goes down for the side of Accompany. He ends up having to release, and he's going to have to run back. This is actually so bad for Accompany. You end up releasing at the very beginning of the instance. The tank is probably going to end up going down to this huge trash pack that they pulled in just a second.
This is probably going to be a full team wipe coming in for Accompany. This was so bad. The healer just going down straight away as soon as they gathered the pull. They're just going to cost them so much time, as Leaxa has to release. They have to use the rest and probably a lot of cooldowns at the last as well. Because if you do such a huge pull, you're going to use a lot of offensive cooldowns. You're going to lose a lot of defensive cooldowns. So both of the rogues, of course, losing their cheat death, losing a lot of other things. So just it's costing him so much time, and I wonder why he's using the rest on this side of the room and just not using stealth to go past and rest on the other side. It's interesting to see how Accompany recovers from this mistake.
Well, they missed the mass res, even though it does have 100 yards on the first cast, so he's trying to recast it again. Misses it again as he does make his way back into the Kragmaw room, and it's just the tale of over-aggressive Kragmaw room pulls. We've seen this time and time again from many different teams in many different regions here, as Lexi finally is getting close enough to his group in order to be able to mass res them all. But Buff War Nerf Rogue ends up procking their second reaping of the instance. They do end up pulling a little bit more conservatively, not too many mobs in that pack, even though it does look really big with that reaping pack in there.
People go down here, Buff War Nerf Rogue side too, as their Rogue went down and their Windwalker is fixated by the platform and goes down too. So we have Devil Rush, and I don't know why he released.
Why did he release?
Yeah, so both the Rogue and the Windwalker released. That means they either have something, and another Rogue going down. This might just be a disaster for Buff War Nerf Rogue too, as the tank goes down and Loda's gonna go out town too. Hopefully he can get a Shadow Meltdown. No, he does not. Okay, this is a full team wipe for Buff War Nerf Rogue as well. So disaster for both of those teams. But Buff War Nerf Rogue has everyone released. Now we'll see how they manage to go to the trash again, because they shrouded the last time around. So hopefully, since they do have two rogues, they might just have a second shroud available to them to go past this trash that they skipped earlier as well. While Accompany is, of course, already rest everybody back up, but they're still behind in trash, 20% almost.
I mean, Buff War Nerf Rogue at least ended up killing that second reaping of the instance, I guess. Accompany here is finally getting the whole entire pack pretty low. The only reason that they ended up wiping there is Lexi ended up going down almost instantly on a too big of a pull there. I think that pack, like, they just proved that they could do that pack regardless of whether or not they did end up having like a lot of their offensive cooldowns available to them. Accompany is making their way through this Kragmaw room as well with their second reaping ending up being procced. They're looking like they're pulling this Death Speaker Reanimated Guardian pack as well. Okay, so the Death Speaker did end up getting blinded off to the side. Of course, that Death Speaker does end up casting Wicked Frenzy and a Rise Fallen, but the Death Speaker ends up getting broken out, but it did get paralysis. So that was actually just kind of that was interesting from the company, but they do end up getting that re-CC'd.
This is still a huge pull coming in by them. They do have double Bloodswarmer, and you see a double fixate come in on one of the rogues. Now, those rogues do not have their cheat of death available anymore, as they had a full team wipe coming in earlier. And a double fixate is going to be super difficult for them to kite and heal away, as it does do magic damage, actually. So the only way to get rid of it as a rogue, of course, is to use the cloak ability. Now, you see the fixate on the healer, and he dropped so low as the Bloodswarmer just went down, so he's going to be safe. But the Proud Warrior as well, just struggling so much to get rid of the 4 stack of Grievous. Now, Proud Warriors don't have a lot of self-healing at all, so it's very difficult for them to get rid of those stacks as they just drop low.
Yeah, you actually do see Accompany there end up pulling the rest of the Reanimated Guardians into that Death Speaker, probably electing to look to Spell Reflect the Wicked Frenzy dot back onto that Death Speaker in order to be able to kill it really quickly. Whereas Buff War Nerf Rogue still dealing with some of the trash in the Kragmaw room here, dealing with some of the Living Rots and the Lashers here, so not a too dangerous pull from them, as these mobs will be going down in just a couple seconds.
Yeah, Buff War Nerf Rogue slightly ahead here compared to Accompany, because once they kill this trash pack, they're going to be ahead in percentage. So Buff War Nerf Rogue still ahead. They also they have one less death, so 5 seconds in favor of Buff War Nerf Rogue, as they pull Krogmaw here with their 60% reaping wave. Now, Krogmaw is one of those bosses that gets pretty dangerous, especially in a tyrannical setting, if you have the Grievous affix, because once the Tantrum comes out, everyone will drop low, and the problem is that the healer needs to heal everyone's back up to 100% immediately, and then the tank is also going to get attacked by Krogmaw again right after the Tantrum while he's low HP, so definitely got to watch out for the HP and how the healer handles this damage.
Yep, Accompany here is going to be looking to proc their third reaping of the instance here in just a couple seconds, as these mobs do end up going down, positioning themselves to pull Kragmaw back right here as the reaping is spawning. While Buff War Nerf Rogue, of course, has already engaged Kragmaw, has him down to 70%, so they are pretty far ahead. They're about 30% on Kragmaw ahead. In addition to that, Accompany has pulled some of the Reanimated Guardians in the Death Speaker trash, so they're a little bit, they have different percent, so it's definitely going to be a different path for the back half of this instance in order to see like what they end up pulling. It's going to be interesting, because we did see Accompany Accompany not end up proccing their reaping on Sporecaller Xancha yesterday, which I think Sloot and I ended up disagreeing with. So maybe we'll end up seeing Accompany maybe changing the route, or maybe they ended up accidentally not tagging one of the Feral Bloodswarmers off to the side and not getting that reaping proc. But we're going to definitely be seeing what Accompany does end up doing with their pathing here.
And buff warrior Nerf Rogue actually having a little bit of RNG lack here on their side, as Krogma actually casted the charge first instead of casting the frontal first. Now if the boss casts his charge first, which is random, then you will get more time in between the tantrums. If he casts the frontal first, then he will get less time in between the tantrums. So very favorable for them here as they get the better RNG version of the ability rotation. And now we're going to see the second tantrum come in as Loda pops his Innervade.
Yep, Accompany accidentally having one of these blood ticks spawning. Of course, whenever there's only one, it's actually not too dangerous, but if you do end up having more, it's going to end up putting a pretty hefty dot on the tank, which can actually be kind of scary. Making sure that you do stomp those maggots on the ground is just very important for both sides here, as we do see buff warrior Nerf Rogue getting Kragma pretty low here. They're probably going to end up having to deal with only one more tantrum, which will end up allowing them to kill the boss very quickly.
Yeah, so Accompany, I mean, there's 30% behind on the boss, and on a tyrannical setting, that is actually quite a lot of HP, especially on Krogma, because Krogma, you have a lot of downtime on DPS because of the tantrum and because of all the other abilities where you need to soak and can't have 100% uptime. So it means even more on Krogma than it would mean on another boss fight. As you see, while the tantrum is going on, of course, damage dealers need to go around and pick up the maggots on the floor and can't be DPSing. So you see the damage meters, of course, are a little bit not very accurate because they both pull the reaping on top, and a lot of the damage or the DPS comes from that reaping wave at the start.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to that, like the trash percent is also kind of deceptive, just because the company did end up pulling those reanimated guardians and that Death Speaker as well. So they're going to be struggling to get the rest of the count that they do end up needing through the rest of the instance, where buff warrior Nerf Rogue is probably going to end up pulling like the double reanimated guardian pack with the hazard spaghetti, Sloot loves to call it, as you do actually see them popping their shrouds. So they're going to be positioning on top of that hazard spaghetti mob and be looking to pull both of these reanimated guardian packs into this hazard spaghetti. So this is like a super efficient pull, whereas the company has already pulled their first reanimated guardian pack, so they can only pull so much into this grotesque horror. So we're going to be seeing what they're going to end up doing after they do end up getting Kragma down here. Kragma being 25% on a company, whereas buff warrior Nerf Rogue here doing a pretty sizable pull.
That was a very good example on how you set up pulls by buff warrior Nerf Rogue. First, they use the shroud to go past them up so they don't have to engage with them too early. Then they blind the spaghetti mob here first, so they don't have to deal with it while the tank is pulling the patrol. So they use the shroud, they blind them up, then the tank goes forward, pulls the patrol, and then once all of them are stacked up, they pull everything on top of each other. So very well done by the team here, buff warrior Nerf Rogue. And also, of course, while everything was happening, while all the pulls were going down, you also saw the marks coming out on the Death Speakers. You saw the skull, the cross marker coming out, because of course those Death Speakers need to be interrupted. They need to be dealt with by the rogue. So each rogue has one of the marks assigned to them. They need to be sure they interrupt the race death, and they also need to make sure they interrupt the Wicked Frenzy, because if it goes through, then a random skeleton is going to get buffed and tank is going to get a lot of damage.
Yeah, we actually do see them ending up pulling these double Defiler Death Speaker pack that sits right in front of Sporecaller Xancha. Something that we actually have seen differently from other teams is they do end up like CCing that Defiler there and ending up the Death Speaker ending up pulling both Defilers into Sporecaller Xancha. I think that's a little bit better of a strategy just because of the kicks required on this pack, as you did see that Withering Curse end up going out on the whole entire group, of course, making them do less damage, and then did end up getting that pack down. They end up proccing their fourth reaping of the instance, and they pulled that reaping into Sporecaller Xancha here.
Yeah, so they actually had the Withering Curse go out, which just do not only does it decrease your max HP, but it also decreases your damage. And the healer, which is the only one who can dispel curse, actually chose to dispel himself instead of anyone else. This is something usually you do when you are a Moonkin, because you finally in your life want to top the damage, so you dispel yourself and leave everyone as they are. But as a healer, dispelling yourself is kind of a questionable choice coming in by Loda here. But the debuff disappeared now, and they're on their way. They are fighting Sporecaller Xancha here.
I mean, I appreciate it. I think Loda is showing why he's the best. He said, "Oh, you guys missed that kick. I'm dispelling myself. You can all suffer here." As the company here is sitting at 74% on their trash count, they have pulled both of the Defilers into Sporecaller Xancha, and like I stated before, they ended up CCing that Death Speaker off to the side, so they're going to end up pulling that into Sporecaller Xancha in just a couple seconds. We actually did see a company wipe to Sporecaller Xancha yesterday. Lexi, of course, getting frontaled by that shockwave cleave that does end up going on the tank, so making sure that he's positioning himself in a way that he doesn't end up having to reset Sporecaller Xancha is very important for them. Buff warrior Nerf Rogue has Sporecaller Xancha down to about 50-ish%, while a company here is down to 89%, so it's actually pretty bad for a company.
Yeah, well done by Buffalo and Nerve Rogue to deal with this boss here with the Reaping Wave. That is actually something very dangerous, and I've talked to some Western teams, specifically Method EU, and they said this is one of the most dangerous pulls in Underrot, where you pull the Reaping on top of the boss, just because there's so many things going on for the tank. Shockwave does a lot of damage, you need to position yourself properly, and then you have all this area of denial on the floor from the Reaping Wave on top of it. So it's a very dangerous pull, and maybe that is why Accompany just chose to not do it. Maybe they tried it in practice and just didn't work out for them, and that's why they choose not to do it. And Buffalo and Nerve Rogue actually having one of those mushrooms stay up and get the debuff applied to everybody, so Loda needs to use the Trank to make sure everyone stays alive.
Yeah, it's also really annoying just because of how the upheavals end up working with all of your melee DPS wanting to be sitting in melee of Spore Caller's Answer the whole entire time as well. So of course, whenever you do get that upheaval on, you're actually able to clear some of the mushrooms with that ground effect that does end up spawning on you after a couple seconds, but you do end up having to get out of melee for it. So we've actually seen a lot of teams in the past ending up just kind of standing in melee, then using rogues with their Cloak of Shadows after the Reaping does come out in order to be able to clear a mass amount of mushrooms there. As you actually do see Ash here popping his cloak, running through all those mushrooms like I was stating, and getting back into melee here, just so that whenever that Festering Harvest does end up going off, it doesn't end up giving a bunch of stacks of that disease on the whole entire group and wiping them.
Yeah, you see Morito on the other side of Buffalo and Nerve Rogue just mirroring the exact same thing, also using a cloak, making sure to get rid of all those mushrooms. So definitely those setups that those teams are running for this dungeon just work out so well. And not only do you have the cloak to get rid of those mushrooms, but you also have a Windwalker who can dispel disease, which the debuff is a disease. So in case something goes wrong, he can still just dispel it off. So very good comp for this dungeon specifically. And now we see Buffalo and Nerve Rogue doing a pretty big pull as they pull this whole skeleton pack with the Danger Spaghetti and the Corruptor as well.
Hazard Spaghetti.
I'm sorry.
Sloot would be disappointed. We actually do see a little bit of a difference in percent too. After Spore Caller's Entry did end up going down for both teams, you actually see Accompany here has not procced their 4th Reaping of the Instance, and it's just what Sloot and I were talking about yesterday whenever we did see Accompany's route, that we just think it's wrong for them to be not proccing their 4th Reaping on top of Spore Caller's Entry. I know it is kind of scary at times, but you should definitely be able to do that and trying to merge that Reaping into other packs. It just ends up coming down to that Priest that they ended up skipping at the very beginning with that blind in order to not pull it into the mask, but it ends up coming back to haunt them, as the strategy from Buffalo Nerf Rogue ended up allowing them to get a little bit more aggressive of like a Reaping timing and give them a little bit more efficiency in their cleave, as Spore Caller's Answer does end up going down here for Accompany, as Buffalo Nerf Rogue has already dealt with the packs after Spore Caller's Answer that they do need here, but they are pulling these 2 Faceless Corruptors into this Grotesque Core.
Yeah, just play a more difficult route and play better for head.
Yeah,
so Buffalo,
yeah.
Buffalo Nerf Rogue is pulling those 2 the Corruptor, on top of this Danger Noodle. Now, one thing to note here is that the Danger Noodle, of course, does not move, but it constantly needs to be interrupted, because if it's not, then there's going to be an AoE spell hitting everybody, not only doing initial damage, but also leaving behind a dot that can't be dispelled, or it can be dispelled, but of course, the healer has cooldown on it. So these Corruptors have these tentacles that spawn and make sure that you need to walk away from them. So still, Buffalo Nerf Rogue is dealing really well with this pull, as they already downed everything else, and once these 2 Corruptors go down, they will hit their 100%, and they are on their way to the last boss.
Yeah, you did see Loda also kind of dipping in and out of melee range, and they're making sure that he's not getting hit by any of the tentacles or that maddening gaze, because basically the healer going down here is the only thing that could end up putting Buffalo Nerf Rogue in a really bad position, just because they do not have any battle reses available to them, except for on that Druid class, because of course only Death Knights, Druids, and Warlocks do have that battle res available in their kit, as the teams do not have engineering battle res available to them on the tournament realm. You actually do see Accompany end up proccing their 4th Reaping of the Instance, pulling it with one of these Faceless Corruptors, and this is one of the reasons that this pull is just so inefficient, just because of where you end up getting this 4th Reaping. You would much rather have it on Spore Caller's Answer, and you actually do see the tank ended up getting feared from Accompany, ended up going down. They end up using a battle res on him, but that's just really bad for them, especially if they're trying to come back here, as Buffalo Nerf Rogue has already dealt with their last Reaping of the Instance, pulled it into Unbound Abomination here, and they're dealing with this boss really well.
Yeah, Company just sloppy play, to be honest, at this point. I mean, you definitely got to shout out for the tank, the warrior, who needs to deal with the Reaping Wave, plus all these other mobs. So it's definitely something that can go wrong, as he got hit by the maddening gaze, where you definitely got to watch out where they're facing, so you can avoid this fear going through. Now, Buffalo Nerf Rogue, of course, playing a little bit safer on their, as they already have the 100% Reaping going in, but they're all very low HP, as you see the Grievous just stacking up on everybody. But Loda managed to get them back too high HP, and they should be fine at this point. They actually use their Bloodlust on Sancha, which most of the time we see teams just saving their Bloodlust for this very last boss because they pull a Reaping on top of it, and it's just a very difficult situation. But Papua and Azerogg using that Bloodlust earlier on Sancha, so it's not available to them on this boss here.
Yeah, Ash from Accompany on the small screen ending up getting hit by that maddening gaze sphere. Fortunately enough, not ending up going down. It's also very important to note that even though it is this Grievous fix, Protection Warriors actually do have a pretty sizable amount of healing here just because of these Rotting Spores only have like 1 HP. So whenever you do end up hitting with like Thunderclap or any other ability, you are going to get a proc of your Victory Rush and be able to heal yourself for a pretty sizable amount, making sure that the Warrior tanks end up being out of Grievous for prolonged periods of time. Warrior tank, of course, on this Grievous fix normally ends up having a pretty big issue with being able to get topped, just because they don't end up having a ton of self-sustain here. But on this fight, no issues here, just making sure that he does end up using his Victory Rush procs as you see him doing 15k HPS.
Yeah, one thing to note here as well on this boss is that this boss works a little bit differently than all other bosses. The HP looks like it's not moving, and that's because there's an energy bar, and the energy bar gets filled by doing damage to the boss. If the energy bar reaches 100, then you'll see those 2 Blood Visages spawn, and if they die, they will remove HP from the boss. So you need to kill 6 in total, so 3 waves of 2 to be sure to kill the Unbound Abomination, so they need to kill 2 more of the Blood Visages here.
Yep, we actually did see them spawn on screen just a couple seconds ago, so we're going to be seeing just the final 2 Blood Visages here spawning in maybe 20 to 30 more seconds here, as Accompany has actually pulled Unbound Abomination, but it might just be too little too late, especially for them, just because they ended up just pathing through Kragmaw's room, just having so many mistakes there towards the very beginning of the instance, even though their back half ended up being okay, but the Blood Visages have already spawned from Unbound Abomination from Buff Ward Nerf Rogue, and they're going to be going down in a couple seconds as Buff Ward Nerf Rogue does end up taking the series 2-0.
Yeah, as Buff
ready to duke it out in everybody's favorite jail dungeon, Tol Dagor, something of course you're familiar with, Tettles, as the 2 teams right off the bat get ready to get over to the Sand Queen.
Hold on, wait, what are you talking about? I'm familiar with the jail dungeon. All right, so Team D and Battle for Champion here, both pulling the Sand Queen into one of these packs of crabs with some of the Vice Jaws here, both of them popping Bloodlust here, making sure that they are killing these explosives, as that is very important because if multiple explosives going off could end up seeing a team go down here, but with the teams like this, we shouldn't see any explosives going off here.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of forced into an early Bloodlust or heroism. We keep calling it Bloodlust, but these are Alliance teams, so it's actually drums or heroism, but nonetheless, they have used their drums, and they're kind of forced into the early Bloodlust. I know we like to harp on it just because the upheaval comes early, but they do need to get these mobs down nice and quick. Those Vice Jaws put a 5% decreasing max HP stack on the tanks constantly, so they can really spell trouble, especially when they hit that enraged territory. A lot of damage coming in for Battle for Champion here, as the group dip's quite low from all the Parasite dots all over the raid right now, including the Sandstorm debuff. Just having so much trouble healing through it right now. Jack does not manage to get the heal in on the Windwalker Monk, so they're forced to use the Battle Red on the Battle Res, on the side of Battle for Champion right now, as they move around in the circular pattern, trying to bait all of those sand traps together. So a bit on the back heal already, even though they're just 1% ahead on the boss.
Yeah, maybe they were just a little bit slow picking up threat on those buzzing drones, making sure that the Rogue ended up getting one of the dots from the drones, so it actually got him so low there, and he ends up going down, forcing them to use their Battle Res. So it's not going to end up costing them anything here, just as long as nobody else does end up going down. But this could actually be problematic moving forward into the jail, because we've actually seen a lot of issues on Jess Howlis. It's been one of the most difficult bosses that we've actually seen in all of the dungeons for whatever reason.
The boss itself is not overly difficult. The problem is the teams just try to do a lot of different strats that make it very difficult in that room, especially combining whatever affixes there might be, whether it be Sanguine or Explosive in this case. Team D and Battle for Champion both sitting at 6% apiece for the Trash, and Sand Queen falling at about the same time. So, you know, Tettles, were saying that one death might not be a big deal, but with how neck and neck these teams have been in previous weeks, and already how they're showing to be at the beginning of this dungeon, it could be a very big deal. But we'll have to see exactly what they do, as Battle for Champion actually runs right past the parasites that spawn from the entrance of the sewers once Sand Queen goes down, and start heading directly upstairs, while Team D actually dealt with it first and is now doing their skip. So Battle for Champion not wasting any time here.
I actually think I kind of like that. So them skipping those parasites just requires them to not actually stand there, deal with a bunch of explosives, having an efficient cleave with just because of the explosives and everything, and they're actually just running past the parasites. They're going to be looking to shroud them, melt them all off, as you do actually see. They end up popping their shroud, and they're making their way towards the Jess Howlis room. They, of course, need about 20-ish% before they do end up making it towards that upper end of the jail jails, and then they will end up using the cannons in order to be able to deal with a lot of the trash here. But this is definitely this is actually an interesting route from Battle for Champion, and I think we're seeing some of the reasons why they ended up having that 14-minute run in time trials.
And no surprise to see Battle for Champion Rogue opening the cages for the Raiders on the side, kind of pre-clearing some of the trash, if you will, that does spawn in the second phase of the boss encounter. Doing well to nail the Sea Speaker there, as we see a very terrified jail, I want to say member, citizen, kind of already out of the cage there on the side of Team D, just very scared at the raw progress of these teams and how quickly they're moving through this dungeon, as Team D, 8% now on the board, dealing with their round of Sea Speakers. Battle for Champion just a bit ahead by virtue of the fact that they did do that Parasite skip downstairs.
Yeah, but they've also aggressively pulled Jess Howlis through those gates. You can actually use Acrobatic Strikes, which is the melee range increase from the Rogues, in order to be able to pull them through the wall, or maybe some like the Chi Burst from the Windwalker Monk or some other abilities in order to be able to pull Jess. So this is actually where we've seen a lot of the teams actually just kind of struggling with this aggressive pull of Jess through this cage wall. We've seen them, whenever Jess does end up phasing at 70% here, as you do see the whole entire group getting stunned, Jess ends up making his way all the way, and he makes his rounds running all the way through the rest of the jail, and he'll end up pulling some of the Sea Speakers back, and we've seen a lot of teams just struggling to be able to deal with some of the Watery Dome casts, some of the Sea Blast casts that we've seen tanks go down from those. Team D here has procced their first reaping of the instance, though, and they're dealing with their reaping right here.
Yeah, so a bit of different strategy coming in from the two teams. Now, we did see in the previous, actually 2 series ago in Tol Dagor, when Negura was up here, Black Mamba actually did that and successfully managed to pull it off, this kind of pulling through the wall. No extra Sea Speakers with it, so we'll see if it works out well for Battle for Champion as they finally interrupt the motivating cry. Jess Howlis has finally made the round, releasing the remaining Raiders, and of course the brother Bobby Howlis, which does need to be interrupted for his stun on whatever target it chooses. That vicious mauling finally interrupted there as Flashing Daggers comes out for Battle for Champion. They will line of sight it at the very last second to make sure that they don't get the immense damage from that ability and delete any orbs that are coming up for explosives. Team D, 25%, has actually done the same thing, pulled Jess Howlis through the wall, but they have not started their second phase yet. They are ahead on trash by 9% and have already dealt with that first reaping, though. Yeah,
I wonder where Battle for Champions actually going to end up getting a large majority of their count from. They might end up pulling some of the trash in the staircase and pulling that all the way up to the cannon. Of course, that sometimes can end up resetting because you do end up pulling it a little bit too far from where it does begin, so there could be issues associated with that. We actually see Team D here. They do end up having some of those Sea Speakers, and the Jess Howlis actually has a Watery Dome cast on him because they actually haven't ended up tagging the Block Ward in there. So the Sea Speakers are still in combat with that Block Ward, and they're just kind of standing there. Jess does end up getting that Watery Dome there, but he ends up getting it DPS'd off him pretty quickly.
And not just that, but the Watery Dome, in terms of duration, it was kind of built it up as something that you don't want going off, and you don't.
Yeah.
But it's only about 7-8 seconds in duration, so by the time Jess Howlis actually made the round all the way around this floor of the jail, it was really not too much of a problem. Bobby Howlis out right now, getting interrupted, and as Battle for Champion has dealt well with the rest of Jess Howlis and has run upstairs, used Shadow Meld, and is already working to crowd control and open up the next gate leading up to the cannons right now. They are below, actually, I don't think we've had a single team in the entirety of the spring season yet not deal with their first reaping before their cannon round. So Battle for Champion really putting a lot of faith into these cannons, and we'll have to pull some extra trash from somewhere, possibly downstairs near the Jess Howlis room, in order to make up for the lack of trash, while Team D right now, single digits on Jess Howlis percent, will be rifling upstairs. They've already dealt with their first reaping, so it's a bit more even than it looks.
Yeah, this is actually this can actually be kind of scary for Battle for Champion as well, just because it also is that explosive fix. They've actually done a really good job of keeping those mobs as they want inside of that doorway as well, using a Ring of Peace and Ursul's Vortex, as you actually do see that down. They have procced their first reaping of the instance here. So something that's actually interesting about Tol Dagor is how reaping ends up working with some of the mobs that are like outside the jail next to the Sand Queen. So sometimes they can kind of get trapped outside and keep you in combat for prolonged periods of time. But with this composition being all Night Elves, Jack won't have an issue with being able to drop combat there. He'll be able to actually get drinks of mana or be able to res if he does end up needing that later on. Team D, of course, has also made their way to the cannon, but Battle for Champion is probably like 20 to 30 seconds ahead, and I think this is the reason that we actually did see Battle for Champion having such a dominant performance in time trials in this dungeon.
It's pretty close, and they're doing a kind of double pincer strat, if you will, of the cannon zone for Battle for Champion, as we've seen one of the rogues actually go to the very far side right now. Both of rogues, of course, pre-tricks of the trading the tank to make sure that all threat from this cannon, massive damage, is transferred over to the tank, who is now dealing with the second 40% reaping wave in the corner of the screen for Battle for Champion. Team D holding their own, doing the same trick as pulling, as Battle for Champion did, pulling the entire floor and just trying to localize as much as they can in the entrance to this balcony area by using a combination of Ring of Peace and Ursul's Vortex. Unfortunately, some of them are leaking, and there are a ton of explosives going off in the middle of the room right now. Umunk needs to get out of dodge right now, otherwise he's going to die. Long taking a huge amount of damage as well. Does not not have his trinket proc just yet, but the monk goes down, and there's just bolts going everywhere from all of the reaping mobs. Long finally goes down, trinket does proc, and immediately the battle rest comes up, but too little too late as Ab gets knifed off too, and the explosives are going on in the corner of the room right now, and it looks like it's going to be a full team wipe here for Team D as Battle for Champion looks to capitalize on this and proc their third reaping wave.
That was actually so bad. So basically, Team D ended up doing a very similar pincer strategy, but a lot of the mobs ended up just kind of getting spread out from one another. Of course, with them not having any ranged DPS with this comp, they were actually kind of struggling in order to be able to deal with the explosives. The explosives started going off. You saw U-Monk ended up spamming Vivify on himself, try to keep himself alive here, but it ended up just being too much with all the explosives and where they ended up being positioned. While Battle for Champion here has just had cleaner pulls overall, with the mobs not getting spread up. They've been grouped up a lot of the times, but you actually do see two explosives going off on the side of Battle for Champion. It looks like some of the it looks like one of the rogues ended up popping maybe his shroud or his vanish or his cloak in order to be able to dodge some of those explosives, just because he would have actually been in a very bad position, and the rest of the group looked like they were just line of sighting it as Team D ends up having one of their rogues drop incredibly low. It looks like he had like 1% health there.
It doesn't get lower than that without a fucking cheap death or dying right now, but they have their backs against the wall. They're trying to hold their own here. Team D as another explosive goes off, 66% for them. Battle for Champion has procced their fourth reaping wave at 82% and are trying to move forward in the dungeon, but there's some explosives ominously in the distance about to explode. They want to get out of range of those, make sure they don't take too much damage as some more trash billows down the side of the balcony here for Battle for Champion. They'll have to deal with that first and wait for this barrel to explode. Team D, I mean, they need a bit of a miracle here. We're not in a tyrannical environment. They can't count on Korg as being their trump card for Battle for Champion to make a mistake on right now, because we are in that fortified setting, so they really need to rush and try to catch up as another explosive goes off. Long does not have that that cheat death trinket available, of course, because he did proc it when he died earlier.
Yep, and Battle for Champion here, they're going to be looking to pull Knight Captain Valyri here in just a couple seconds. So they've pulled Knight Captain Valyri pre-10 minutes. So man, they are actually just rushing straight through this dungeon. They actually dealt with those cannons really well, even though it is this explosive affix, and it can be kind of hectic at times. They were actually just making sure that they did a really good job of line of sighting the explosives or outranging them, or even whenever they were doing the pincer strategy, they made sure that they were just like sitting on the correct side of where the mobs were going to be, so they could either end up killing the explosives if they were too close, or just making sure that they were not like they were outranging, where Team D end up having a full wipe there. So Team D is actually pretty far behind here. Of course, there is a 4 death differential. Battle for Champion has only had 1 death, where Team D has had 5.
Yeah, Long going to pull more as the fourth Reaping Wave procs in for Team D right now. They need 88% in this non-teaming environment on the board to make sure that they have enough trash after Knight Captain Valyri in order to finish off their last Reaping Wave. Most teams get well above that, somewhere in the low 90s before heading over past Knight Captain. Battle for Champion at 50%, 49 now on Knight Captain Valyri, just moving well to the corners, doing an excellent job of being really efficient on the boss by pre-moving to the corners and staying out of the blast radiuses of the barrels in the corners to make sure that the melee have full-time access to the boss that often just kind of stutters and casts a lot. A couple more explosives going off here for Team D, but they're well out of dodge right now as they start heading down, but Mog takes one more explosive just on the way out for good measure.
Yeah, you actually do see Ab as well running that mass entangling, so it actually kind of sucks even more that they ended up wiping to those explosives just because those mobs were not grouped up. Maybe if he ended up having Typhoon, the mobs would have been able to be a little bit more close together, because you have to end up proactively using mass entangle in order to keep the mobs like grouped up in the doorway and stuff like that. But once the mobs do get scattered, there's no real way for you to be able to group them back up as a Typhoon would allow you to do that. So maybe Ab should have thought about using a Typhoon. Of course, mass entangle can be very good for that. Battle for Champion here has already downed Knight Captain Valyri, and they are making their way onto Overseer Korg here in just a couple seconds.
And they're at that perfect 88% that I was talking about earlier, exactly the amount they need to be at for these last 5 mobs to count the remainder of the trash that's needed for the 5th Reaping Wave. Now, they're already kind of destroying 3 of them right now. It looks like they're going to pull all of them and then run upstairs and mass Shadow Meld with their Night Elf Racial to get rid of that 5th Reaping stack. A couple of these will be pretty close, though, so it's possible that they'll have a few of the Risen Souls leak to them, just because by virtue of their massive aggro radius, but it shouldn't really be a problem for them to finish it off. But might even just pull it along with Korg, as they're certainly not very detrimental to anything as long as there's no lost souls combined with that. Team D, 91% on the board for trash, 40% on Captain Valyri. They're a fair bit behind, not to mention Tettles, as we always look at. It's important, 4 death difference.
Yep, for sure. You do see Team D here. They are going to be downing Knight Captain Valyri's Battle for Champion here. Just has a couple more shots on this Warden here, and then he will be going down. And then, like you said, they're going to end up popping a mass Shadow Meld or using their vanishes or stuff like that. I think they're definitely going to have some of the Reaping ending up leaking onto Overseer Korg here, which can actually be kind of scary for the tank, but I think all in all it shouldn't be too dangerous as long as you don't end up standing in any of the Shadow Smashers or anything there. they have pulled Overseer Korgus here, popping their Bloodlust here, as Overseer Korgus is actually starting to get melted here by their team, by the Battle for Champion here.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they actually managed to shake off the entirety of the Reaping Wave right now. Korgus already at 80% for Battle for Champion, who has committed their final Bloodlust to this moment. We're in a fortified environment, unlike the Tyrannical we've seen in previous weeks, so Korgus, still a very dangerous boss, especially by how much, how unlucky you are really with the RNG of the double explosives coming off. So you have to pay attention to when that Dead-Eye cast goes out, the Dead-Eye, excuse me, goes out, and it can certainly tax the healer a fair bit depending on how many you get. But in this kind of fortified environment, I think you could handle a fair few right now.
They actually did not proc their last Reaping of the Instance, so maybe they ended up like blinding that last Warden or something at a very low HP, which kind of makes sense. So the Warden might be actually standing off to the side at just like super low health. They're going to end up pulling it into the bottom half of Overseer Korgus here in just a couple seconds. So that's actually a very good strategy for Battle for Champion. We actually, I think we saw something similar from Method in A, as they did end up keeping one of the trash mobs just kind of off to the side CC'd, making sure that it did not end up disrupting them too much during this fight, because this fight is actually kind of intense with how you end up having it tanked and everything, making sure that you end up dodging the cross ignition and all the cannons and everything. So making sure that trash mob is as least disruptive as possible is very important. Battle for Champion here has finally crossed the 14-minute mark, and Overseer Korgus here is at 25%.
Yeah, I mean, Muscle Stunk just under our noses, so they will have to turn around indeed and deal with that last percentage that they need for the mob. Group here a bit unhealthy at 50% right now as they take another explosive round, but Cross Ignition does give a bit of time for Jack to hot up and heal the group up nicely as he starts to regrowth. We do see both Rogue and Windwalker heroically stepping in front of the next Deadeye. Trouble here for Team D right now, unfortunately, as Ab goes down. Overseer Korgus is only at 46%. There is no way they're going to finish this encounter, even on a fortified setting, without the healers. Umung finally follows suit, 7 deaths on the board, and they are going to have a full team wipe here. Battle for Champion on the prowl right now as Korgus has been down, and they head over to the final Ashvane Warden, who was indeed low health CC'd on the side, and they close out the first series in, I mean, a super health to that middle building house. I'm trying to refuse to say the word and deny Twitch out their meme, but the house strat is coming in strong for both of these teams. We see the mass stealth come up right away. They'll do a fairly substantial pull from all ends and try to line of sight it within the confines of this center area just to make sure they can cleave it all down. Now, often we actually see teams not pop their Bloodlust right away and wait for a second pull. It kind of depends on the affixes, and Team D, listening to what I was saying, has opted not to move into the house, which I very much like from them.
Yeah, Battle for Champion here also off to the right-hand side here, not moving into the house as well. They're actually kind of standing off to the right. They're pulling a very different pull than we've actually seen from a lot of teams. They have, there looks like 4 Peacekeepers in that pack there. Of course, since it is bursting here, it's actually not too bad to pull a lot of Peacekeepers just because they do end up having staggered health, so it's easy to not refresh that bursting at low health. But of course, that's also something to be looking out for because of like thugs and mech jockeys and everything else. You can kind of get comboed down if you're not careful.
Certainly comboed down, yeah. A lot of residual damage in the form of, you know, just grease guns going out. A lot of damage coming in on Long right now. He might not be long for this world as he jumps away in action. Just huge amounts of damage from these Peacekeepers. And to your word, Tettles, you know, the thing with the Peacekeepers is they're a high health mob and they're very much worth the percent. So they're really quite a good counter, if you will, to bursting. You don't have to pull a lot of them. You deal with their staggered health and you just kind of chisel them down slowly for that nice big percentage as Team D starts kiting around in circles here. 15% on the board for trash for them. We have a cheat death proc here for Battle for Champion, though, as the Warrior gets sub 20%. A lot of healing coming in for Jack as some bursting stacks start to plague the rest of the group. They don't care, though, as they pull more on top of the first Reaping Wave that they're proc. Here comes the Quaking, though. So much work cut out for Jack. They do manage to stabilize, but needs to keep an eye on the dispels from those Reaping Souls.
Yep, and Team D here is going to be looking to proc their first Reaping as well in just a couple seconds, as Battle for Champion is just a little bit ahead just because of the strategy that they ended up doing with the first pull of the instance. Of course, getting some of that more front-loaded trash out of the way, and then they're just kind of making sure that they're a little bit closer to coin-operated crowd Pummeler within proximity, as the other Rogue did also get hit by that Shadow Smash ground effect, so he does have 10% reduced damage. So we could accidentally see him getting maybe comboed by this Addled Thug that whenever it does use the Inhaled Vapors, he does enrage.
Actually, no, it was the Shadow Smash that he got hit by, so that's actually a 20% health reduction for a minute. Doesn't have Clash of Shadows to get it off. Nobody's interrupting the Flechettes right now for Battle for Champion. The Windwalker goes down. Jack barely staying alive as the Warrior procs his cheat death Bon Sandi's trinket. The Rogue would just proc the cheat death from that Shadow Smash, goes down. Barely hanging on is the second Rogue right now as Jack starts to stabilize the rest of the group, and they finish it off with a Quaking hitting, but the Fish Feasts have gone down and they're gonna have to res up the rest of the group. So near crisis diversion there for Battle for Champion as they manage to finish it off, get the mass res up, and Team D starting to pull slightly ahead now. 33% on the board for them and 0 deaths.
I'll say it, 4-stack bursting with Flechettes going off. not what you're looking to do for Battle for Champion. Team D here has also pulled some of these Peacekeepers, and they're doing a similar pull with the packs that they ended up grabbing. Team D here with the double Peacekeeper pack, and I think Battle for Champion's only going to end up having one, just with where they are in this instance. Of course, the mech jockeys, whenever they do end up running next to the nearest Peacekeeper robot. Of course, they only end up running within a certain proximity, but you are able to move the mech jockeys whenever they are out of combat using abilities like Ring of Peace, Typhoon. DKs can grip them as well, so using some things like that in order to be able to move them closer to the nearest Peacekeeper unpiloted bot is very important just for count.
A lot of damage coming in here for Lung right now. Team D just barely managing. The tanks just dip so low. I always say a lot of damage, but the truth is they dip so low from these multiple Peacekeepers, especially when they have their charged claws up right now. They do proc their second Reaping as 45% hits for Team D, getting ready to combine it with some more trash. A couple of vendors and a couple of mech jockeys now. A lot of kind of splash and residual damage that we've talked about before. The mech jockeys will cast Grease Gun on one of the near targets, but let's put that on hold for a sec as Disaster is striking again for Battle for Champion. The tank goes down right now. Jack immediately gets the battle res up, won't have that again available for 6 minutes. Both rogues do not have their cheat death. Windwalker goes down as well as Jack is struggling to heal and dispel on the tank, but also heal through all the Grave Bolts, just randomly hitting the group. Of Quaking at a very inopportune time hitting right now as one of the rogues gets chunked down sub 20% and manages to go down as well. No battle res available for them as they look to try and destroy the rest of this Reaping pack, who is doing just that back at them. Ice Spritzer interrupted on Jack right now, so he can keep casting group moves out of these green swirlies and make sure to stay alive. But Jack, just so much damage coming in. Here's another Quaking. This could be it for them as he had to stop his healing for just a moment. Whew, they did manage to stabilize here. Again, Tettles, the same story. They just barely managed to squeeze by, not have a full team wipe, but at what cost? 5 deaths on the board total now. They had to 4-man the rest of this trash and the Reaping wave, and Team D is just coasting on ahead.
Yeah, maybe they just end up doing a little bit too aggressive of pulls whenever their Reaping does end up coming out, because the 40% Reaping ended up coming out, ended up costing them a couple of deaths. The 20% Reaping ended up coming out and then costing them some deaths as well at the very beginning. So maybe they're just maybe pulling just a little bit aggressive with the Reaping. Of course, that it does end up doing a significant amount of tank damage, and there can just be some other residual stuff with how the thugs end up charging you and stunning you and stuff. Team D is also not out of the water here as well, as the group does drop incredibly low, but Ab is doing his best to keep everybody back up. Jack has also been electing to run this Tree of Life, which in a bursting Quaking environment can be very good because you do get those instant wild growth casts, but his Tree of Life was on cooldown there. It ended up not coming out, and they ended up just kind of bleeding some deaths, and they're behind Team D here. Yeah, no, certainly a fair bit behind. I mean, that double whammy certainly put them at a huge disadvantage as the third Reaping wave comes in here for Team D right now, combining with some more trash. But what I was wanting to say, and what you mentioned as well, Tettles, is there's a lot of splash residual damage on the melee in this trash. I mean, you have the thugs that charge one of the far targets. You have Grease Gun going out from the mech jockeys. You have Ice Spritzer going out on random targets. You have the Flechettes, if they're not interrupted, hitting the entire group, something that actually almost completely wiped Battle for Champion earlier. So it's not as easy as it looks. It's not just about the tank damage with the Peacekeeper and combining that with a lot of the Reaping coming in. It's just huge amounts of attention that's needed on top of the melee. Plus, these poor healers are getting Quaking splashed on them every 20 seconds. Yeah, I mean, also the melee have to move out of range of one another with this Quaking as well. With this triple melee composition plus the tank, they kind of have to make sure that they're not stacked on top of one another. Positioning is also very limited just because of how the Peacekeepers with their shocked claw ability works as well. So basically, whenever the tank, or that charge claw right there, whenever the Peacekeeper does have that charge claw on it, he'll end up meleeing the tank, and if you were too close, you'll end up chaining a lightning bolt from you into all the other people that are around you. So making sure that you're spread the whole entire time, it just kind of ends up being very difficult, especially whenever there's like a Reaping coming out and there's a lot going on. So making sure that you do end up just having everything clean and making sure that you're super comfortable with your pulls is the most important thing, especially in MOTHERLOAD here. As Team D has pulled another pack, just kind of taking it a little bit slower, making sure that they have clean pulls and making sure that they're consistent with what they end up doing. Reggie Titles, another explosion of bursting coming here for Team D. Now, one stack, not too bad, bursting. I don't think we've seen it today. Oh, no, actually, we saw it in the previous series, so we did know that, of course, it's a stacking 4-second damage over time every time you kill a trash mob, and it can roll, so teams have to be very good not to DPS brain it, as we call it here. Make sure that you don't roll too many stacks, as it just becomes unhealable at that point, especially with whatever else, what other damage may exist, depending on the trash that you've pulled. Battle for Champion, 65% right now. Another Quaking pulsing for them as they're pulling just a Thug, but they're waiting for a few of the mech jockeys to get in their Peacekeepers right now and combining it with a couple of the Laborers as Tree of Life is busted out here from Jack on the right side. Charge coming in on their Windwalker Monk from
one of the thugs, of course, as Team D starts backing up the final pull before the mechanized Peacekeeper, before the coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, the first boss. I think they're going to probably be popping their 4th Reaping here and then combining it with said Pummeler.
Yeah, and something that's also important to note is that they still have 2 minutes left before their Bloodlust or their drums do end up coming up as well. We've actually seen a lot of teams be looking to proc their Reaping into coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, but a lot of the time they end up having a Bloodlust or the drums available for them as that stated debuff does end up falling. Team D there, they ended up Shadow Melding off a decent amount of that Reaping, so that's actually going to be a pretty good pull here. Umunk ended up getting hit by that Shadow Smash, so of course he has less health, which can actually be kind of dangerous here, especially with that Shock Pulse.
But we've seen it be a huge problem for one of the 2 rogues I mentioned at the beginning of the dungeon when he got hit by the Shadow Smash, procs his cheat death, and then that snowballed into their almost first wipe. So these small mistakes really add up over time, and they can certainly detriment your team and just have a spot death when combined with, as you're saying, you know, one of the static pulses coming out with, let's say, a Quaking at the same time. You have 20% reduced max HP for a minute, not something you want to see. Here comes the Quaking indeed for Team D as they move away from the coins on the ground. One of the rogues getting quite low, but no cheat death proc. Want to make sure you move away from those coins as the boss will try to absorb any nearby coin piles, buffing his damage permanently by 10%. So team doing well to, of course, get away from the coins, but minimize the amount of space that they invade by doing so, because it is a tyrannical boss, so you do need a fair bit of space around this map.
Yep, and you actually do see the static pulse there ending up getting comboed in with that Quaking as well. So the issue that it becomes just with these affixes is whenever you do end up getting comboed here, Ab also wants to be kicking the foot bombs into the boss, and the reason for that being is whenever those foot bombs do end up hitting the boss, it will make the boss take increased damage. And Ab being a ranged healer, of course, he's able to do some damage from range, but not only that, he does like significantly less damage than the melee DPS. So the melee DPS are more like, oh, you should be kicking it in, you're the healer, but Ab is also like, well, wait, I need to be healing you guys back to full before the static pulse comes out. And if it does end up getting comboed with that Quaking, they need to be like almost fully topped just to make sure that nobody's going to be in danger of dying here. So it can actually be just kind of easy to be greedy here a lot of the time, because in like a non-Quaking scenarios, it can just be like, oh, the healer should be doing this. This is a very easy. But for here, you need to actually kind of play it a little bit more conservative with how you end up kicking in those foot bombs.
30% for Team D here on the first boss. Battle for Champion actually catching up a fair bit now. They're about to hit their 30% too, but the big difference here is they have not procced their 4th Reaping Wave. They're still at 74%. Group dipping quite low right now. A combination, once again, of that Quake and Static Pulse shocking the group. Right now, the Warrior finally gets healed up above the 20% mark, making sure that he's not in that quite dangerous range to re-proc that Trinket. That is once again available for them. Another Quake pulsing here for Battle for Champion, whilst Team D at 14% on the crowd-operated Pummeler.
Yeah, I think the Coin Pummeler ended up picking up some of those coins as well, so you have to make sure that you end up kiting Coin-operated Crowd Pummeler away from a bunch of those coins that are on the ground, and then it gives him a damage increase whenever he does end up picking up some of those coins. So making sure that you end up kiting the boss around a lot is very good for them. But Coin-operated Crowd Pummeler is just going to be going down in just a couple more seconds for both sides here, as both sides do end up having Bloodlust available. It looked like Team D's tank ended up propping his Bonzombi's Bargain Trinket there at the very end. So this is an issue with, like, so tanks want to be a little bit more aggressive. They say, I don't really want to pop my shield wall here. The Coin-operated Crowd Pummeler, even though he does have a couple stacks of the coin debuff, he should be able to live just a couple more % on Coin Pummeler, so he ends up not popping anything, but he ends up getting his Bonzombi's Bargain procced in.
Yeah, and you know, that's a really an opportune thing to have, especially before a really large aggressive pull here where they do commit their heroism / drums to. Now, that Trinket is not going to be up for a long time for the tank here on the side of Team D, who is ironically also named Long. 6 minutes on the board, so they're halfway through their heroism / drums right now on Team D's side as they use one more bump coming out of that Ring of Peace just to make sure that they're stabilized. But a lot of damage coming in for the group as Ab, Long, and Umunk, the Windwalker, all go down simultaneously, trying to rush back into action. The rogues are staying alive right now. They, I believe, pre-cloaked some of the bursting stacks there so they could stay alive, but the rest of the group had just way too much damage coming in from the bursting, and they were not able to heal through it. Fortunately, they did have the checkpoint at that first boss that just recently down, and they were able to get right back up and get back in action. So could have maybe been planned. They could have just said, you know what, we're just going to sacrifice ourselves here and get this massive mobs down. We'll take the hit for it and get up to that 90%. Battle for Champion, 79% on the board, about to proc their 4th Reaping.
But they also also haven't popped their Bloodlust as well, so it's going to be interesting to see where they end up using that Drums or Bloodlust as well. Team D, so those Wonton Sappers can actually be kind of annoying, especially in a bursting environment, because the pull size that the Team D was doing, and the Wonton Sappers end up casting a final blast whenever they do end up getting low, so they'll end up killing themselves from whatever percentage HP that they are at. So sometimes you'll end up seeing people ending up just knocking it in order to cancel it as Battle for Champion, having trouble in Paradise here as they have a couple deaths here. They're looking like they're going to have a full wipe as they did end up proccing their 4th Reaping.
I mean, just 1 ton of damage coming in on the entire group right now as they all get offed by the explosions and the bursting following suit. Both teams just having a lot of trouble with the similar pull here post first boss. Just there's so much trash density. This is what we were talking about with the issue at the beginning of the dungeon combined with bursting. The trash density in this dungeon is like no other, and if you just overcommit these pulls and just roll all the stacks through it, you're going to have a bad time, and that's exactly what happened on both sides. Certainly much worse for Battle for Champion as they have now 10 deaths on the board, doubling their death count as compared to Team D's 3, who has already rushed upstairs, 98% trash on the board, just kind of edging on towards that 5th Reaping wave. We've seen some groups kind of pull it on top of this boss and finish it off with it. We will see perhaps one of those worms on the side coming up, but UMonk has a lot of stacks here from these Earth Ragers right now.
Yeah, so basically whenever you do get fixated by the Earth Ragers, they'll end up meleeing you. Putting stacks of a bleed on you. UMonk ended up getting 4 stacks even though he did have his Ring of Peace down, so maybe just a little bit aggressive, too aggressive in his positioning there, getting melee even through that Ring of Peace, so that was actually not super great for him. But I wanted to highlight what Ab ended up doing. He ended up getting fixated by 2 of the Earth Ragers on pull. He ends up jumping into travel form, running through the middle of AsaRock, taking a couple stacks of the bleed, but he made sure that those 2 Earth Ragers were actually just right in melee range of AsaRock. Then he ended up dropping his Ursul's Vortex in order to be able to keep those Earth Ragers kind of in position there so that all the melee DPS could cleave them down as quickly as possible. Battle for Champion here has it also pulled AsaRock, committing their Bloodlust as well, while Team D here already at 50% on AsaRock.
So the mystery of course, what they were holding that Bloodlust for has been seen here as the Earth Ragers are down to 50% HP for Battle for Champion, dealing through this first more difficult part of the boss, but as soon as these Earth Ragers die, it is a bit of a snooze fest for the players, which is why we see teams often pull trash on top of the boss, trying to proc either extra Reaping Waves or get some more of that trash percentage. Wouldn't be shocked on the side of Team D to see them pull one of the worms, the earthworms, well, not really earthworms, but the rock worms down on the hill up. Now, we've seen that be very disastrous to some of the Western teams before by accidentally social or proximity aggroing some of the extra trash with it. Not what they really want to happen, but we'll have to see exactly what they do, as AsaRock is 30% for Team D, 3 deaths on the board, and they are just knocking on the door of that last pull, and here we go. Good view from our observers here as we do see Ab indeed grab one of these Stone Fears on the side. They're actually not worms at all. I thought they were going to get one of the Shale Spiders, but they don't. They actually grab the 2 Stone Furies, bring them right up to on top of AsaRock, and will be cleaving them down. Just want to make sure you interrupt these Furious Quakes, though.
Yeah, Team D actually doing a really good job in Ab there, making sure that those Stone Furies did end up kind of patrolling all the way up that wall. You end up socialing that pack if you end up being just too impatient with how you end up pulling those Stone Furies, and they end up just like walking straight through the Taskmaster pack, which would actually be very dangerous for them just because they're not only not ready for it, but they also don't need the count. Plus, like if the tank doesn't end up having defensives available for that Taskmaster pack, then it can be kind of annoying. Battle for Champion here, looks like Jack ended up hopping in travel form, running and pulling Taskmaster Askiri near AsaRock here.
Yeah, and that's a lot of damage coming in. Askari does a very annoying kind of short range aura where he protects all of the trash around him. Not the boss, if I'm not mistaken, but just the trash with 50% damage decrease taken. So you want to constantly move around that, making sure that everything else dies while Askari stays out of range of them, and that means you have to move the boss, and there's the frontal going on. So a bit of a pain in the butt pull here for Battle for Champion, but they are making good work of it as the AsaRock is about to hit 10% in just a moment here. Team D has already taken their minecart ride right down. They've already dealt with their 5th Reaping, as we know, and they're running desperately over to Rixxa Fluxflame's platform, the 3rd boss of the dungeon, where they will Shadow Meld, drop aggro on not only the trash that they ran through, but also the 5th Reaping wave, and get ready for the boss encounter.
Yeah, just making sure that they're far enough away of all the mobs in order to be able to not stay in combat with the masterminds or other mobs that would have true sight that normally end up keeping people in combat for prolonged periods of time. You do see one of these Reaping mobs ending up funneling in here just a couple seconds. This is very normal here, as most of the time you end up pulling one of the Reaping mobs just because it doesn't end up getting dropped from Shadow Melt for whatever reason. Battle for Champion here has it down AsaRock here, and they are making their way towards the R&D wing. They're going to need to be looking to get a lot of count here, and a lot of time we do see teams looking to skip a lot of the count from the R&D wing just by virtue of it having a lot of health, and these masterminds aren't really able to be pulled into a lot of other trash mobs. The weapons tester is kind of annoying, and just a lot of this trash in this area can just be super frustrating to deal with, and it can actually be hard to get a lot of count here, so we are only seeing Battle for Champion looking to get about 8% here.
I'm pretty sure Battle for Champions probably got hit in the back a few times there as he went forward to taunt one of the extra trash packs, so kind of made a few hits there unnecessarily and dipped quite dangerously low, but Jack's Tree of Life has saved that situation right now as he's pumping a lot of regrowths into the group as quickly as possible, conserving the mana, of course, as it does not get consumed during this Tree of Life, and having instant cast on those regrowths with this very dangerous trash pool that Titles had mentioned earlier. Team D here, 58% on Rixxa Fluxflame. We do know that when the boss was pulled, it was aggressively pulled with the shield wall from the warrior, but Battle for Champion bit off once again more than they could chew as the tank does go down. The Windwalker goes down as well. Jack barely hanging on. The second rogue goes down, and it looks like it's going to be another full team wipe right now for Battle for Champion. Not the team that you want to see coming in here to be the best of the best in the East, but Battle for Champion full wipe will checkpoint upstairs at AsaRock and try to ride the minecart down yet again to finish off the remaining 4%. Team D making masterful work here of Rixxa Fluxflame.
Yeah, the Beast of the East, Battle for Champion here, just having more issues with the R&D wing, and this is the major reason why we don't see it pulled. The trash can just be so deadly, especially if your tank doesn't end up having a ton of cooldowns available to him, if he doesn't end up having that shield wall or other things available. We did see them pulling the Taskmaster into the bottom, a little bit of AsaRock as well, so maybe he ended up not having a ton of defensives available to him, but he of course did not have that Juan Somni's bargain trinket like we all end up talking about all the time, just because it's that pseudo cheat death. So he ends up just going down and they end up just losing the pull here, whereas Team D going to be downing Rixxa Fluxflame in just a couple more seconds with no hiccups here. This is actually very good for them because Rixxa can actually be kind of dangerous with how the disease or that poison or that dot ends up going on all the players. The chemical burn ends up needing to get dispelled on everybody, or it can end up being just diffused magic or cloaked or spell reflected back onto Rixxa. So they've actually done a really good job of dealing with that, plus the quaking that can end up comboing somebody down if they do end up having that chemical burn on them for too long. And
now what I'm curious to see is if they're going to manage to mass stealth the entirety of the trash here. And no, they won't.
Long
the
is
answer
gone.
to that question. He is long gone indeed, but Battle for Champion has now dealt with the trash. Unfortunately, the tank died a bit early with the rest of the trash pull here as they get to Rixxa's platform. One of the Windwalker went down as well, and Jack has managed to Shadow Meld, but unsuccessfully so, as Jack is doing an excellent job cosplaying the Jack we know and dying on the battlefield here as well, getting ready. Actually, I don't even know what he's getting ready to do. He's going to have to run all the way back by himself, and there are some true sight mobs along the way, not to mention the entirety of the Reaping Pack. This is absolutely disastrous from Battle for Champion, not the quality of team that we know and want to see. 20 deaths on the board, a rather awful performance from them here in Motherload, while Team D with, I don't want to say fully flawless performance, they do have the 3 deaths, but I do think those are actually premeditated deaths with the amount of bursting going off after the first boss. So let's say an almost flawless run coming in here from Team D, as Mogul Razdunk, the fourth and final boss of the dungeon, is now sub 80%.
Yeah, I mean, slamming through 11 stack after on those Earthshaper pack after coin operated crowd pummeler, I would say is kind of normal, especially whenever they are electing to use their Bloodlust there and kind of do as much damage as they possibly can there. Battle for Champion here, just more mistakes. They end up wiping to the skip as well. They also had so many of those Reaping mobs right on top of them just because of where in proximity they do end up spawning to them, and that's another reason why we actually see it be a little bit better sometimes for you to spawn that Reaping in other places like near AsaRock or on that far left side, because they end up having to run all the way across that R&D wing and ending up having major issues. Ab ends up going down.
So Ab goes down right now on Team D, and they have no choice but to immediately reset the boss, which is why Long heroic leaps out of the area, trying not to pull any of the nearby trash and the bombs. They wait for Mogul to finally reset, and they're going to have to get going here again as the dots still tick from that rocket explosion, the homing missile explosion on the group. But I mean, you know, it kind of doesn't matter, but certainly not what you want to see out of them as they have to restart the boss. And from, I mean, it could have been worse. They could have been a bit lower, but they do have to, and their only battle res died at 63% on the boss. They have to go again.
Yeah, I mean, against teams that are playing better, you would actually just pretty much automatically lose from a major mistake like that. Having to reset Mogul Razdunk from that much HP on a tyrannical setting can actually just be so punishing. They do have their battle res available to them. Battle for Champion here hasn't even pulled Rixxa Fluxflame, so that's why it's not even actually that bad for Team D, but just a mistake that we actually should not be seeing, especially especially since these are the best teams in the world that we're talking about here. These are going to be likely the top 2 teams that we do see coming out of this East Cup, and Battle for Champion here having 21 deaths, while Team D here resetting Mogul Razdunk. They just need to make sure that they end up cleaning up their runs here, and we could actually end up seeing, we actually see U-Monk end up going down. They do have battle reses available for them, but that's just, again, just another mistake.
I mean, you hate to see it. U-Monk does go down. They have 3 battle reses, immediately get him up. Not just that, but Mog also procced his cheat death unnecessarily there, so now one of the rogues is vulnerable. The Monk is back up there without a battle res. Another 5 seconds added on the board for them. Battle for Champion doing what they can to battle back from behind. 21 deaths on the board. Group at half health right now. Huge amounts of damage coming in from Rixxa. We do know she deals that pure fire damage on the tank. Not blockable either, so a lot of babysitting and attention needed on the tank, so you're relying on your group to manage those chemical burns well and stay out of the poo-poo on the ground.
Yeah, make sure you stay out of the poo-poo on the ground is very important on Rixxa Fluxflame. Mogul Razdunk can actually be kind of annoying, especially whenever you have this Quaking affix comboed with the Gatling gun, because most of the time you want to be super close to Mogul Razdunk in order to be able to take the quickest path to make the circle around him with that Gatling gun, but whenever you do end up getting Quaking, you end up kind of having to move out, maybe move a little bit further ahead of where you want to be, maybe popping like a speed cooldown or something like that in order to be able to get in a better position. Team D is going to be facing Mogul Razdunk here in just a couple seconds whenever they do get him down to 50% though, whereas Battle for Champion, Rixxa Fluxflame is getting close to 50% herself as well.
Yeah, 50% on completely different bosses. Entire boss behind at the moment, not to mention the entire trash skip that they need to do leading up to that platform. Team D now doing well to spread out and get ready to DPS down these Sky Scorchers that do spawn during the transition phase here on Mogul. Now, concussion charges need to be interrupted. Well, they don't really need to be interrupted, but it's just a bit of annoying area denial that the players need to move out of. Outside of that is really just these AsaRock Heartseekers that will decrease healing taken by 35% on players, but you can't intercept it by standing in the way of the red beam. Doing well here to move to the various oil drums on the side. Are those really oil drums? I thought they were like drills or something, but nonetheless,
they look like oil drums. I don't know.
They have an upside down skull on them, so so the toxic oil drums on the side do need to be stomped by the boss and baited over, but U-Monk getting Razdunked right now below 10% health and does need to be healed up right now as one of the AsaRock Heartseekers is on him, and the Quaking pulses him so low but manages to get out. But even bigger disaster here on Battle for Champion as the tank does go down. We did mention how dangerous some of the damage is from this boss right now. No battle res access for the Windwalker Monk as they do manage to get the Prot Warrior up on Battle for Champion, and Rixxa does go below 10%. They should manage to clean the rest of this up, but man, this is something else for Battle for Champion right now. Yeah,
I hope that they can able to get their composure back and be ready for the next match as well, because this is definitely not what we want to see, especially from this team as well. This fight can actually be super scary for your tank. Most of the time we see Prot Warriors not having too many difficulties on this fight just because they do have that spell reflect, and the tank goes down for the 3rd time on Rixxa Fluxflame. He ended up going down, getting battle res, going down, getting battle res again, and then he ends up going down to the Quaking at the very end. So Prot Warriors do have that spell reflect available to them, but
it's only once every 25 seconds. You know what they say, titles 3rd time's the charm right now. As he does go down, manages to get res. 25 deaths on the board, and Battle for Champion is going to be battling for a very long time if this is the kind of performance they're trying to bring in order to win this cup and go on to the LAN as the first seed. Team D, 13% now on Mogul Razdunk as they look to finish up. Certainly with difficulties of their own, I'm sure our good friend Sappers is having a big smile on his face, ready to talk about this match here. But Mogul Razdunk, single digits of percent, looking to close out the 1-1 tie. Yeah,
as Team D having to reset Mogul Razdunk there just because Ab ends up dying, it was actually pretty bad. Battle for Champion here, proccing the Reaping. They finally end up getting they end up getting Shadow Meld off by Jack, but they have 2 people dead, so they're going to be looking to mass res as Team D here does end up solidifying their win here at the very end.
I mean, that was these teams right now. Now, you know, like Sarah's alluded to, one of the things that immediately distinguishes teams amongst each other in the competition in this dungeon is how are they going to pull this entire first room? Is it going to be the entire first room? Are they going to 2-pull it with splitting the 4 packs 2 by 2? We'll have to see, but certainly these affixes titles allow for a full room pull. It doesn't get any freer than that in that sense.
Yep, you actually do see Ab here running ahead while the rest of Team D is standing there in position in order to be able to kill those fear mobs, those Shadows of Zul in just a couple seconds as they do spawn here. Battle for Champion doing a very similar thing. The minions of Zul do end up coming out here. They do end up getting Thunderclap down as Battle for Champion here has pulled the whole entire room. Team D mirroring the same pull, both of them popping Bloodlust here as this is it here.
Umang getting clipped by one of those volcanic plumes early. They have to be careful, and there's going to be a lot of whirlwinds coming out of those warriors on the side that do immense amounts of damage. You can see that kind of blue gale debuff on the player frames right now. So much damage coming in for the tanks as Battle for Champions Pro, we're already opting to go defensive, backs up, and we do see a defensive Ring of Peace coming out on their side. Team D manages to stabilize a lot of damage on the melee. It's just inevitable that they're going to get clipped by one of those tornadoes, but they can certainly avoid them by sitting in the epicenter of the casting mobs. So depending on how well grouped they are, both teams finally averting any form of disaster and tank deaths as they manage to stabilize, finish off most of the trash, and just deal with the champions.
Yeah, basically the issue with this pack for a lot of teams is the pack gets kind of spread out with where those Witch Doctors and those champions end up being. It kind of is, it comes down to whenever you use your Ursul's Vortex and your Ring of Peace in order to be able to keep those mobs grouped up as long as possible. We've actually seen some teams have like differences in like 30 or 40 seconds on this first pull just because of how grouped up the mobs end up being. Team D here is going to be looking to pull the Golden Serpent here, where Battle for Champion already has it down to 90%.
Something important to note as well, Baby Pig got hit by one of those Shadow Smashes. Important to note because that's 20% decreased health on probably what has been at least one of the hardest bosses for teams across these weeks that we've seen. The Golden Serpent is absolutely ruthless with that Spit Gold debuff on the different players. Can do a lot of damage. We're seeing the huge chunks come out for Battle for Champion on one of the rogues as finally the debuff does get healed off. So if they're unlucky and it constantly starts to barrage on Baby Pig, he will not only proc that cheat death, but could even die on a second application. Both teams now, of course, 22% apiece and about 75% on the boss, so really neck and neck right now.
Yeah, a lot of the issues that comes with the Golden Serpent and that dot comes with whenever it does end up putting and be applied to the same target over and over again. We've actually seen some wrestlers going down previously just because of they end up getting that dot just over and over again. They don't end up having Bark Skin or Iron Bark available to them, no renewals or other things, and they just end up getting clipped from like 70% health and ending up going down. Of course, that dot does end up doing about 70-ish% whenever it's unmitigated, so just making sure that you do layer your defense as well is very important. As Jack for Battle for Champion here in melee and cat form trying to squeeze in as much damage as he can, where Ab is sitting out here at range, just making sure that everybody's kind of topped up.
That is a very bold move, Cotton. I mean, it's just such a dangerous boss, so easy to fall behind on the pulsing damage from that Spit Gold. Does well to go into bear form and drop it off in the pile of the remaining golds on the side as Team D rushes out of that area denial. That will punt you and deal some physical damage. 43% on the board for both of them, so the amount of damage that is managed to squeeze out by the healers is actually pretty comparable in favor actually of Team D. So it's funny that you mentioned Jack doing it. It seems that Team D's doing a better job on the healer side for DPS output right now.
It's also something that's very interesting is the fact that Team D has overcome about a 10% deficit whenever they did end up pulling the boss just a little bit slower on the Golden Serpent here. So it's definitely interesting to see them actually trying to catch up in percent here. Maybe the Windwalker Monk ended up just kind of squeezing out a little bit more single target damage. Maybe just the priority of the boss was a little bit better for Team D, making sure that they ended up just nuking down the boss and just kind of letting the Reaping get cleaved down, whereas Battle for Champion maybe put a little bit more emphasis on making sure that all of that Reaping did end up dying.
Yeah, I mean, the Reaping, it's something, Sours mentions it all the time. We all mentioned it actually. Reaping is really not that important when it comes to combining. You always want to focus on the primary trash or boss that you're combining the Reaping with and just kind of passively cleave it down as long as you have those dispels active on the tank and you're avoiding things on the ground well. Jack here taking another pulsing hit from the Spit Gold as he drops it off well away from the Golden Serpent. Both teams now neck and neck at 9%. Really interesting to see as the Team D did start to pull ahead a bit, but Battle for Champion closed that gap very quickly with their second round of offensive cooldowns coming up. Big tick coming on the Windwalker from Battle for Champion. 2% on both teams. Boss will fall in just a moment. They will head over, of course, to the Gauntlet, combining those Colossi from the start as we see Jack already getting in kitty form and running out to the Constructs at the beginning as he drops a feast, starts eating it quickly while these doors open up, and then we'll grab those two Colossi from the beginning of the dungeon that they shrouded past and combine it with this Gauntlet.
I love this from Long from Team D. He ends up running all the way into the Gauntlet room in order to be able to start the RP on the Gauntlet mobs. Then he drops his Fish Feast in order to be able to get topped up while Ab is sitting there on the other side trying to get the Colossus. We actually do see mirrored pulls here from Battle for Champion and Team D, so this is very neck and neck.
Yeah, it's really neck and neck. I mean, it's really exciting to see right now. Of course, we do have a set rotation for the Gauntlet, as we've mentioned in the starter weeks of the spring season here, just to make sure that everybody's aware of that, just to keep the integrity and equality of the dungeon. distribution in terms of random spawning equal for both teams. Same with the third boss in here once we get to that council boss. Here come the two colossi for both sides, doing well to outrange or of course dodge the frontals from them, something that is absolutely disastrous to get hit by. Not only does it stun you, but it deals an immense amount of nature damage, so doing well, you know, a bit advantageous to this melee comp, just makes it really easy to dance around them instead of staying at a distance and dodging the huge cone. So Battle for Champion, Team D both doing an excellent job as they wait for the next part of their gauntlet to spawn. A bit of advantage here for Battle for Champion. They've actually already had their 3 kings spawn.
Yeah, this part of the gauntlet can actually be super scary for both sides. The guard captain, of course, does cast that axe barrage. It puts a pretty big physical bleed on the whole entire group, so making sure they do end up getting like that dwarf ray shoulder interrupted, or you can even line of sight it if you like, is very important. Additionally, the king ends up casting the lightning rod ability. Once the lightning rod does end up having 1 tick, it's able to be knocked with either Typhoon or Ring of Peace, or you can even use like Engineering Belt knock if you do have access to that on live realms. Of course, the teams here not having access to that Engineering Belt knock, which would actually be pretty useful here. You do see that Ring of Peace coming out for the side of Team D in order to knock that lightning rod. Battle for Champion dealing with their mobs just a little bit quicker, proccing that second reaping of the instance as Team D does the same.
Yeah, I mean, this is once again neck and neck.
Neck and neck.
Something we'll be saying quite a bit here as Team D waits for the Queen and King to spawn, the third part of this 4-part gauntlet right now. And here it is as they get to ready to interrupt the shadow bolts, of course, from Queen Polly, if I'm not mistaken. Now, she will also mind control one of the players. They do not have an offensive dispel available. They're not running any classes or races that are capable of doing that. So they'll have to deal well with that seduce on either side, as we see Jack here get that seduction with those little beautiful, cute hearts popping up above him on the side of Team D. It's actually on Mog that gets it. Both teams managed to do it well, deal with their second reaping, of course, avoid any swirlies on the ground, and get ready for the final part of this gauntlet area with the range mob plus her raptor.
Yeah, this can actually be kind of annoying, especially if it does end up going on a DPS. It's very good for Battle for Champion to have that mind control go on Jack, just because the damage lost is so much less than it going on Mog. The next major pressure point of the instance is definitely going to be with how they deal with Machimba's room, with the embalming fluids and those constructs that do entomb you. So I think what we would like to see is one of the teams end up pulling both the constructs with all the embalming fluids in order to be able to DPS it down as quickly as possible, then proccing the reaping and pulling it straight into Machimba. But we haven't seen that a lot in the East region. That's more of like a Western style pull that we have seen.
Yeah, it's certainly the most aggressive way you can do it. Obviously more dangerous because you're just involving a lot more trash in there. So, but with how close these two competitors are right now, and they must know it, they have to kind of go for these big plays and just get it done as quickly as possible. Battle for Champion just getting barely ahead here of Team D as they get out of the gauntlet first and rush over to get past this purifying construct. We'll see a shroud come up from them in just a moment. As they do get by it, Team D has finally finished their gauntlet and will be heading down the stairs following suit of Battle for Champion. So all eyes are going to be right now on if they're going to combine the two constructs on either side of the room with the Ooey Gooey Rich and Chewies in the middle and pulling them over to their respective tombs to make sure that the closest proximity tomb is able to be spam clicked by the players to rescue their teammate.
Yep, and Long popping his Lightfoot Potion a little bit early here, making sure that he is the first entering the room, pulling all the embalming fluids here. As we do see Battle for Champion here, they look like they pulled both of the constructs as well, so something that we were definitely... Oh, they've only pulled one of the constructs here, which is definitely interesting because they're going to end up proccing their Reaping early.
Yeah, I was going to say it might be just to offset their cast, maybe, the Entomb cast.
Okay, there we go.
Here's the second one right now. So they might kind of DPS them down together nonetheless, as Jack is doing a good job here, just running from a barrage of poison bolts. If you do get hit by that poison, it's a fairly substantial damage over time, and he does get hit, unfortunately, as he's glowing green right now. He does have a Dispel Poison available to him if needed, but the real danger in those, it actually slows you as well, so it slows you and deals us substantial damage over time. Team doing well to grab that Entomb out immediately. Team D following suit. Everything has been 1-for-1 with these two teams as the two constructs are pulled on either side.
Yep, and Jack making sure that he's positioning himself well to be near the sarcophaguses, sarcophagoso, whatever it is, in order to be able to, because whenever that Entomb does go out, it does put the player in the nearest one, so making sure that you are next to them as the ranged DPS or the healer or something like that is very important, especially if you are doing this double construct pull. You actually do see Team D and Battle for Champion here downing both of their constructs at the exact same time, and they're pulling their Reaping straight into Machimba here.
Straight into Machimba. Team D, I mean, there was about a 5-second difference between them. That's closed down to about a second or two after this room in Team D. So Team D doing the room just a bit faster right now as both teams engage with Machimba. The second Reaping, of course, Reaping pouring in not only from the small goo buoys that we saw and the 2 constructs, but also all of that gauntlet trash, or most of the gauntlet trash, has turned into reaping and will be chasing them down. It's going to take it a while to get here, but it will be joining Machimba. Both teams doing an excellent job in positioning Machimba around the sides of the room so that the fire does not deny too much real estate from the players when they will need to run over for the Entomb. Machimba 75%, almost a piece for both teams, as we can see Ab run over and immediately grab the sarcophagus on the side of Team D as to not spawn one of those zombies.
I love this embalming fluid pull by both of these teams. They both prove that they actually can do it, because we've seen a lot of teams just be super hesitant. You actually do see Battle for Champion here electing to use their Bloodlust, while Team D maybe being a little bit more patient, maybe waiting for the next Entomb, maybe they're waiting for the next trash pack right after Machimba. We've seen a lot of teams electing to use their Bloodlust here and not getting the value out of it that we'd actually like to see. A lot of the reason is because of the Shadow Smashes, a lot of the reaping, just a lot of the area denial and the uptime that you're actually just not able to get on Machimba, just because of how the room ends up shaping out. So we actually do see them kind of taking a little bit of a lead here by maybe about 10%, but they did elect to use their Bloodlust here.
Yeah, but you know what? They are actually taking advantage of it. You're absolutely right. In some previous years, we've seen this kind of split of the 2 teams, one side using heroism, one side not. Long gets really low here, though, just to interrupt that for a moment. Popping the Bloodlust, the shield wall at 8% health, trying to save himself, as finally Ab does heal him. It is important to note that Machimba is one of the hardest hitting bosses of all the dungeon bosses. Absolutely crushes tanks in the face, so if you're caught for just a moment without that shield block up, he can really just destroy you, as we saw on the side of Team D with Long there. But fortunately, no death or cheat death trinket proccing for them. But to my point, Tettles, you know, we've seen in previous series, both in the West and East, some teams obviously use the Bloodlust here and some not. And Battle for Champion has made good use of it. The teams were neck and neck by about 1-2%, and I mean, it's now about a 8 to 10% difference between them.
Yeah, but not only is it 8 to 10%, but if they can skip one of the Entombs as well, this could actually be even better for them, because of course, whenever you do end up having that Entomb go out, you could have to like completely cross the room and have to kind of frantically break the person out. But it looks like Team D is actually trying to catch back up with Battle for Champion in terms of damage here.
Yeah, their second round of cooldowns must just come up at the end of the boss here, so they'll probably finish it only about 5-6% net behind on Battle for Champion. It's really going to depend with these 2 teams, how aggressive is this heroism / Bloodlust going to allow Team D to be with this very dangerous bridge trash composed of Berserkers, Witch Doctors, and the Hex Priest coming up. That is really that's dangerous for all teams. We have seen teams be able to easily do both of the first 2 packs with and without Bloodlust / heroism, so I'm confident both can do that. It's really, is Team D going to go beyond and then pull the Beastmaster as well, maybe even the Hulk on top of it?
Yeah, you actually did see about a 7-second difference between Team D and Battle for Champion. One of the people on the side of Team D ended up getting that Entomb cast on him, but it ended up getting canceled maybe by like a Shadow Meld or something like that. Team D here, of course, going very big, pulling the Raptors, the Witch Doctors, and all the Berserkers in this room. They did end up having one of the mobs blinded off to the side here. I didn't actually see what mob's at. Okay, they do have the Beastmaster blinded off to the side there, and they have elected to use their Bloodlust wall. Battle for Champion here just taking it maybe a little bit smaller here, just trying to be a little bit more patient as they don't have their Bloodlust to use.
I mean, they have to, right? Because they don't have access to that Bloodlust heroism. So the last one we'll see will be actually on King Dazar in the final parts of the dungeon. Ab getting a Frost Shock there from one of the Witch Doctors, manages to stave it off as Long is taking down from one of the Berserkers. Very dangerous bleeds coming in. Umung dipping quite low. Baby Pig as well, as Ab gets another Frost Shock on him. You can just see the sheer amount of damage that goes up on the group. Long running for his life right now as he takes down to 4%. He has 2 stacks of the bleed. Procs his trinket and goes down. Ab immediately turns around and starts to res him, but the rest of the group is going down. Baby Pig has been finished off right now. Mog is ticking down as procs his cheat death and goes down as well. Umunk is desperately kiting at the bottom of the stairs, and there is no way they're going to finish the rest of these mobs, especially with those healing tide totems going down from the Witch Doctor, pulsing healing as the mobs run through them. So it's going to be a disastrous full team wipe here for Team D, who committed their bloodlust to this as well. Ab goes down. Umunk and Long are kiting around in circles right now, trying to finish off the rest of this pull. They might be able to recover it, but there's a half-health Berserker. It's going to take them ages to do this. Battle for Champion has already moved through, killed the Beastmaster, killed the Hulk, proc their 4th Reaping, and are moving over to the Spectral Berserker, Witch Doctor, and Hex Priest combo pack.
That's okay. So Umunk ends up shadow melding it off. He ends up rezzing Ab. Both of the rogues ended up electing to run back. Of course, most of the time you end up getting this Gilded Loa, which will end up flying you onto the bridge. But both of the teams electing to shroud past that construct, so that they're not going to have that Loa available to them. Team D also has accidentally pulled the Brood at some point, so they're ending up dealing with this inside of Machimba's room, as both of the rogues are running back. But this is just so bad for Team D. I know we talked about how we wanted to see them go aggressively, but you have to be able to be clean while you're aggressive. You can't just overpull, ending up having almost a full wipe here, and then they just ended up losing so much time off of this.
I mean, just team disaster here for them right now on the left side. They're just kind of grabbing up the scraps of the pull that they did. They're at 77% now. Finishing up these 2 mobs will get them to that 4th Reaping Wave. Battle for Champion has already moved through the majority of the bridge, doing their final large pull that should get them to 96% trash, whilst they skip the remaining 3 Berserkers. Actually, it's a Hex Priest that they CC'd on the side, so they're going to skip the remainder of these mobs by shadow melding it in the boss's room once they get to 96% here in a moment.
Yep, 96% of course, because they do end up having to deal with the Shadow of Zul. That will give them the remainder of their count after they do end up dealing with the council fight here, which you will see them running into the council fights room. And just second, Team D here, still dealing with that Brood, it looks like, trying to make sure that they're pulling it all the way back up the stairs as the Rogues have finally met back up with them. But overall, Team Disaster here, as you stated, as they're trying to just kind of salvage what ended up going wrong there with that big pull.
Yeah, I mean, that's a toughie, and, you know, I'm going to want to talk about this at the desk when Sours is here too, but, you know, we've seen teams dedicate their bloodlust to doing the double Berserker pack and then crowd controlling the Beastmaster and pulling the Raptors. And that's the extra super duper trash pull that they're doing with their bloodlust. But it's not worth it. Those Raptors don't do anything. So you're not actually really gaining much from that bloodlust outside of killing the trash quicker. So Team D, in terms of raw percentage, wasn't really gaining much by dealing with 2 mobs that are very just don't matter anyway in the first place. And they end up dealing the Beastmaster and the Hulk, and like without the 2 Raptors, who cares at that point? Really not that effective of a pull, and the Bloodlust just didn't work out for them. They had pretty much the full team wipe, barely recovered it, and are now at 86% with that 4th Reaping Wave. Battle for Champion looking great here, has already pulled the first boss of this 3-boss council, Kula the Butcher, who is obviously the hardest boss of them just because of that Sever Axe cast.
Yeah, Sever Axe, of course, is a very big bleed that can actually be very dangerous if it goes on the same person multiple times. Of course, the Windwalker Monk and the Resto Druid the most likely to go down if they do have multiple of these Axe casts just because of how many cooldowns that they have available to them. You do see the Windwalker Monk having his Touch of Karma popped here, that giving him a very large shield and redirecting a lot of damage to Kula the Butcher, as you do see that Severing Axe falling in just a couple more seconds. So this is going to be pretty good for them, as they're probably only going to get one more of these Severing Axe casts, as it does end up getting dodged or parried by one of the team members for Battle for Champion. So very good use of that riposte from that Outlaw Rogue there, as you actually do see it on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, that was just perfect for them, right?
Yep.
You actually want it to go on the Windwalker at least once because of that Touch of Karma, just getting extra damage out of it. So everything working out nice and dandy for Battle for Champion here as they start on Zonazal the Wise, the second boss of this 3-boss council. A lot of Lightning Bolt spam cast that needs to be interrupted, or of course taking advantage of with that 25-second cooldown Spell Reflect from the Protection Warrior. Will of course spawn those 4 totems on the side and need to rush over and kill the explosive one as quickly as possible, whilst we see Kula's Ghost essentially kind of re-enable with the team and go to the middle of the room, casting her signature spell, something that we'll see often. But the Poison Nova goes off for Battle for Champion. How does this even happen? Huge amounts of damage coming up. Absolute disaster here as the Windwalker goes down. Both rogues proc their cheat death. One of them does manage to cloak it off, and the second rogue goes down too. They do have battle resist for both of them available. Jack was only able to get his Dispel on 2 targets. Never in my time casting all of the Battle for Azerogg dungeons have I seen that cast go off on broadcast.
What is happening? So I guess they ended up just... So that Poison Nova, of course, puts a pretty bad dot on the whole entire...
very mean dot.
Yeah, so you actually did see both the tank and the Resto Druid getting it off of them as quickly as possible, but then the DPS ended up going down. They ended up having to burn both their battle resists, so it's not going to end up wiping them, but that should have been punished so hard. If they ended up wiping there, they would have had to have released at the very beginning of the instance. That would have been so bad.
That would have been.
Oh my goodness.
At that point, Jack would have probably dispelled himself and Shadow Melded in the corner.
I hope.
To try and res the team. But they are still ahead here because Team D's disaster earlier was a fair bit bigger than the one that the crisis that they just averted here for Battle for Champion. They are 1 boss behind, essentially, in this combo of 3 bosses. So Team D is only now killing off Kula the Butcher. In just a moment, we can see that Severing Axe dot damage over time take on Ab right now for the side of Team D, whilst Battle for Champion has managed to recover from that situation and is downing Zonazal the Wise in just a moment.
Yeah, we had an explosive totem go off yesterday. We got the Poison Nova going off today. Zanazal proving that he is actually the most dangerous of this council fight, not Kula the Butcher. You actually do see Team D here about to deal with Kula in just a couple more percent. Hopefully not getting too many more of these Severing Axe casts, as it does end up going on U-Monk here at the very end. You're actually able to Shadow Meld it off in between these mini bosses once you do drop combat. So maybe we'll see if U-Monk does recognize that. No, he's just casting Vivify find to himself there.
And the bigger problem, what I was pointing to there, Teddles, is you might have actually died right before you turned over to that screen. So they actually have 5 deaths on the board for their 4 and used their last battle res. Both teams had no battle res available, but fortunately the cooldown, the 10-minute cooldown for the next battle res has just come up for both teams. So they do have a bit of buffer right now as Kula rejoins the fight here for Battle for Champion, throwing out her whirling axes just in time for Akali the Conqueror to get ready with that debilitating backhand and cast the next barrel through where the team will need to absorb. Finally,
they got it.
Poison Nova has been interrupted. Cheers in chat for everybody as Battle for Champion has managed to get that Poison Nova out of the way and group up here for the battle through for Akali.
Yeah, so making sure they actually end up vanishing the barrel through there. So they're just making sure that they're actually able to DPS Akali as much as possible. Of course, you end up having to elect to use a lot more healing, and that debilitating backhand does end up getting casted on the tank, so the tank ends up having way less damage if he does end up having to run away from that debilitating backhand. He ends up blocking it or parrying it.
It's about a 1 in 4 chance.
Yeah, okay, so he ends up parrying it there, so he ends up just being able to stand in melee range, DPSing the whole entire time. So this is definitely going to be okay for them. Battle for Champion there, avoiding Crisis, downing the Council fight, and they're on their way to Shadow for Zul here, where Team D downing Zen is all the wise at just a couple more %.
Shadow for Zul or Shadow of Zul, of course. Doesn't matter which one. Very dangerous mob coming out. Even in this even in this tyrannical setting, I mean, this mob packs a punch, non-spell reflectable, huge amounts of nothing but sustained shadow damage, both with a nuke when the Shadow Barrage hits, and also damage over time, over 10-second component. So the tank is going to need to babysit quite a bit here, as Ignore Pain will be the name of the game, along with trying to just kill him before he kills you. A very general, broad concept that all WoW players love.
Yeah, I mean, Shadow of Zul, of course, always being very dangerous whenever you do end up getting higher levels here, especially on like fortified settings. Of course, this is tyrannical, so this is not exactly the most dangerous thing. We don't have any raging or other fixes that could end up impacting the tank here with the Shadow of Zul, so it should end up going down without a hitch. Maybe there ends up being some issues with those minions of Zul spawning off to the side. We did actually see the Windwalker Monk for Battle for Champion using his paralysis, as he did end up hopping off the boss. So making sure that that minion of Zul is paralysis. They're going to be looking to Shadow Meld off their Reaping once they do kill this mob here in just a couple seconds. But Team D here is downing Akali and maybe 50-ish more %, so they're putting themselves in an okay spot in order to maybe come back if BFC does end up having a major issue on Dazar.
Yeah, and only a very slight hiccup here for Battle for Champion. I mean, I only saw the Prot Warrior dip below 50% HP once, so really, really solid support and healing from Jack there as the final portion of the damage over time goes through. The disgusting sugar-crusted fish feast finally does go down. Sounds delicious. Does go down for the team right now as they have a quick eat. Everybody gets mana and health back up, and they start on King Dazar, the final boss of the dungeon. Battle for Champion trying to close out this series 2-1 and stay alive in the upper bracket.
Yeah, so Jack ended up not getting any of that juicy fish. So he's only at
awful.
So he's only at 60% mana here, which in other fixed combinations could actually be very dangerous. We actually saw in West Cup last week a lot of the issues with Grievous on this instance, just because of how that Quaking Leap has to end up being healed all the way back up whenever it does end up applying Grievous to the whole entire group here. But overall, on this week for Dazar, the Quaking Leap is actually easy to just kind of get passively hotted back through. Maybe just use some of your defensives here, as you actually didn't see it end up doing any damage here, as Dazar ended up phasing there and summoning Raban.
Yeah, Raban, really not too dangerous for Raptor, just kind of leave him on the side. You can displace him occasionally by just either Grip, of course, they've got Death Knight, or the Ring of Peace here, but he really just doesn't do anything. Just get out of his frontal, barely melees the tank for really any damage at all. Spell Reflect coming up for the Prot Warrior here for whatever reason, because that frontal, the Blade Flurry, is actually physical damage, of course, from Dazar, so you have to make sure you have your block up. He probably did it just for the explosive damage of the Quaking Leap. That is magic damage, just trying to mitigate a bit of that burst, as finally we see Bloodlust or Heroism popped here for Battle for Champion right now. King Dazar about to hit 60% as Tzala will come down, or Tzala will come down, the second Raptor that the King Dazar will mount, and any damage to him will actually be redirected to Tzala.
I wonder if it's a silent T or not. Anyways, they do end up preemptively popping their Bloodlust here and trying to nuke down this mounted Raptor. The major ability for it is the Deathly Roar. Of course, it can end up it ends up fearing you. The warrior tank can only end up mitigating one with Berserker Rage, so making sure that he does end up using Berserker Rage on the first fear is very important here. Battle for Champion here is on the very end of this fight here, as Dazar just ends up doing this Quaking Leap. He'll end up summoning these spears that end up coming out from the sky, but if you end up standing near this river of gold kind of thing, it'll actually be able to put you in a better position in order to be able to dodge all of those spears coming out from the sky. While Team D here, just a couple more % on Shadow of Azul, and they're going to be pulling Dazar in just a couple more seconds themselves.
Yeah, the Long just barely getting healed up there as Umung takes a big hit. Finally, Team D does manage to stabilize. Long still heading down, about 3 seconds left worth of damage over time from that Shadow Barrage, but they're a fair bit behind at this point, not to mention the 3 deaths on the board, so the only way Battle for Champion is going to lose this is, frankly, a full team wipe, or just having 2 of their DPS die and having to 3-man the rest of the boss, anything in that realm. But it looks pretty solid for them right now as they do a good job dodging the rest of these Gale calls coming out from King Dazar. Certainly don't want that nature damage on the rest of your DPS. You want your healer being able to focus some damage back into the boss.
Yeah, you actually did see the Rogue there for Battle for Champion dodging that Quaking Leap initial damage tick, so that's actually very good for him. It allows Jack to do a little bit more DPS here, as you do see Jack doing about 8k-ish damage on this fight, as he's actually able to sit in cat form for prolonged periods of time. He actually goes bear whenever he doesn't eat that Quaking Leap. We actually saw JV from Team Method in A electing to use the cat form Wild Charge in order to be able to jump out of that Quaking Leap and take as little damage as possible. So something that Jack could do, but he just elects to eat it in bear form instead. Team D here has pulled Dazar, Raban has spawned, but it looks like it's just too little too late as Dazar is sub 10% for Battle for Champion.
Unfortunately, we were not able to say neck and neck any more times in the rest of this match. As Battle for Champion now at 3% on King Dazar, and has quite masterfully only one hiccup, one really grievous elementary hiccup, but nonetheless